Hogwarts, Harley from the Which Way by author Shimo Nuha Lie. Chapter 121-150. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And those who want to support me, I have a Patreon channel, get early access to video on Patreon. Chapter 121, Conversing with Tom Riddle bonus chapter, 2 in 1 big chapter. And here I thought you were strong. Turns out you're just trash that breaks with a touch. Harley shook her head disdainfully, a large amount of spider silk appearing around her. Using the silk, she moved swiftly, landing next to Professor Lockhart's remains. While the basilisk was still some distance away, Harley pulled out the special magic mirror she carried. Through previous experiments, Harley had noticed that there were also spirits in this wizarding world. So she had specifically enchanted this magic mirror with a ritual to capture spirits, imprison them within the magic mirror, and prevent them from dissipating. This magic mirror was now equivalent to a multifunctional charm that could be used permanently and repeatedly. Although it was much more valuable and difficult to craft than one-time charms, this magic mirror was indeed much more effective. Witches were not skilled in necromancy and could only slowly learn through acquired magical rituals. But Harley believed that with repeated attempts, she would surely gain useful information. As for how to imprison spirits, witches skilled in curses and dark arts were absolute experts in this field. Harley's hair grew rapidly, coiling around her wand and hanging by her ear, ensuring she could grab it at any time. Then she extended her right hand, grabbing a few times in the void. Law of all things, spirits are forbidden to attach to dead flesh here. At the same time, Harley opened her spiritual vision, and with the magic mirror in her left hand, she waved it forward, activating the solidified ritual on it. In her spiritual vision, Harley clearly saw Professor Lockhart's bewildered face. Under the effect of the law of all things, Professor Lockhart's spirit, without any resistance, rapidly separated. While using the ritual to capture it, she subconsciously glanced at Professor Lockhart's corpse, wanting to see if there were any valuable magical items on it. Professor Lockhart is so rich. He actually carries such a valuable magical item with him. Harley sighed in her heart, looking at the dazzling ball of light in Professor Lockhart's lower abdomen. Wait, Harley suddenly realized something was wrong. Whose magical item would be stuffed inside their stomach? Harley reacted quickly, her legs suddenly pushing off, leaping into the distance. The spider silk wrapped around her also contracted, pulling Harley away from Professor Lockhart's remains. Boom! A violent explosion suddenly rang out. Professor Lockhart's stomach exploded, organs flying, blood splattering, exactly like the Auror Captain Tealhiggs before him. However, he was luckier, as Professor Lockhart's head and limbs remained, with only his torso turning into countless fragments that could not be reassembled. Professor Lockhart once again set off his favorite fireworks, but the material was himself. Harley landed steadily back on the ground, her expression extremely grim. Fortunately, she had sensed the danger earlier and reacted quickly, thus avoiding most of the explosion. Harley had also used the lingering power of the frozen world from before, using snowflakes in midair to form a thick ice wall. Combined with Harley's Protega, it helped her block most of the shockwave, leaving her unharmed. But the feeling of almost getting into trouble was truly unpleasant. Clap, clap, clap. Applause suddenly echoed in the Great Hall, accompanied by rumbling. All the doors of the Great Hall had closed at some unknown point, shimmering with magical light. A tall, black-haired boy stood on top of the basilisk's head, clapping and watching her. The boy was tall and handsome, with eyes as deep as black gemstones, neat short hair that looked clean and sharp, and a lean physique devoid of any greasy feeling. Unlike Professor Lockhart's deliberately crafted charm, he exuded an inherent attractiveness, a natural charisma. Harley felt that if she were an ordinary girl, she would probably feel a liking for him at first sight. The boy had a wand tucked behind his ear. If Harley remembered correctly, it was the wand of the unlucky Auror Captain Tealhiggs from earlier. Tom Marvolo Riddle? Harley asked aloud. Although she didn't recognize the boy in front of her, in such a brutal scene, the only person Harley could think of who remained so calm was the younger version of Lord Voldemort Professor Lockhart had mentioned earlier. That's right, it's me. The boy raised an eyebrow, and the wand flew into his hand. He bowed courteously, his voice filled with endless gentleness. Hello, Miss Harley. This is our first meeting in person. I must say, you are truly as beautiful as a rose, exuding an invisible fragrance that makes one want to be intoxicated by it. However, Miss Harley, I prefer you to call me Lord Voldemort. Don't you think that name is better? Flight from death, how romantic. Isn't that much better than the common name Tom? Of course I don't think so, Harley said crisply. Does your current state count as escaping death? I saw your main body last semester. Do you know, he is now just a wisp of mist, fragile and helpless. And you, I suppose you are a clone. Aren't you also only able to reside in a diary? Riddle smiled, without the slightest embarrassment. He patted the basilisk, making a hissing sound. The basilisk obediently lowered its head, pressing against the ground. Riddle leapt down, landing at the same height as Harley, and slowly walked forward, as leisurely as if he were just going to meet an old friend. Miss Harley, you know quite a lot. Although some of your guesses aren't entirely accurate, they are largely close to the truth. Riddle's eyes revealed appreciation. Although I don't know why you, as a baby, could defeat my main body, that self-proclaimed great waste. But I think you truly have the qualifications now, the qualifications to defeat the greatest dark wizard in history. Riddle stopped not far from Harley, then suddenly asked softly, we are both extraordinary, both young, both in our prime. Do you want to join forces with me, Harley? We can change this world. His voice was full of seduction and carried a special magic. If it weren't for the fact that witches themselves possessed very strong charm, making Harley quite familiar with this ability, Harley admitted that she might have been unknowingly affected. Harley didn't answer immediately, but tilted her head. Your main body killed my parents. You still want to join forces with me? First, he is not my main body. Riddle shook his head in rebuttal. He is my future, a failed and foolish future. Believe me, I hate him as much as you do, because he chose the most foolish path, a path that abandoned wisdom and gave up brains. But I am different. I am still 16, I have reason, and I have infinite possibilities. If you are willing to join forces with me, I can kill him with my own hands to prove that what I say is true, or I can let you kill him to take revenge, if you wish. Also, although he killed your parents, what are parents? I have never felt that parents have any necessity to exist. At this point, the smile on Riddle's face disappeared, becoming slightly cold. They are just dirty tools, utterly useless except for certain specific purposes. I have never cared about my parents, and I believe someone like you, who is like me, wouldn't care about your own parents either. Harley did not respond, but sat down on a nearby chair. Black flames ignited on her body, clearing the ice from the chair. She gently propped up her chin, looking at Riddle. Then can we sit down and talk? There are many things I don't understand. You don't need to try to stall for time, waiting for Professor McGonagall and that aura to come in. A smile reappeared on Riddle's face. I am a legitimate Slytherin descendant and have some control over the castle. Now this great hall has been temporarily closed by the power of Hogwarts, and no one can force their way in. I'm just curious about some things, so I want to chat with you. Harley's expression remained unchanged. All right then, let's talk. Riddle waved his wand, and a ghostly blue flame burned away the frost on the chair. You ask, Miss Harley, I can answer any question you pose. Harley secretly curled her lip. She wouldn't completely believe a single word from the young Lord Voldemort in front of her. After all, Harley, who had lived for so long, could tell at a glance that he was a standard liar. Leaving aside other things, if it were truly impossible for anyone to enter the Great Hall, then why would he have driven Dumbledore away beforehand? Wasn't it because he was afraid? What's the situation with the series of attacks in the castle? What's your relationship with Professor Lockhart? Despite not fully trusting Riddle's answers, Harley still asked. Our relationship. He's an idiot, I'm not, it's that simple. Riddle's answer was evasive, with a slight hint of pride in his voice. That little girl named Ginny got me, and poured her emotions into me when I was still a diary. I took the opportunity to extract some of her life force, regained some strength, and manipulated her to carry out an attack. Unfortunately, she was quickly listed as a suspect, so I naturally had to choose to transfer. And that Lockhart, who seemed to know nothing, was obviously a very easy person to control. But I really didn't expect that I had misjudged him. I thought he was a waste, but it turns out he had some skill. At least he had good talent in memory magic and illusion, but it was unstable due to his own reasons. He wanted to control me, but I also wanted to control him. Neither of us could do anything to the other. Later, we initially reached a deal. He would help me gain a body, and I would help him lift his curse and fulfill some of his wishes. Then he used his handsome face to date some young witches, and took the opportunity to pass me into different people's hands, launching attacks and extracting life force. Too bad, he's an idiot. At this point, Riddle gave a mocking laugh. Previously, I couldn't control him simply because I was too weak. After collecting a large amount of life force and fear, and extracting the lives and souls of those 12 monsters, that Lockhart was just a toy in my eyes. I took the opportunity to help him lift his curse, quietly modified his memories, and instilled a lot of combat knowledge in him. Otherwise, how could he, a waste who only knew illusion and sneak attacks, have performed so valiantly before? So he wasn't normal today, it was all because of you. I don't believe that flamboyant person would have the courage to confront the Ministry of Magic in public. I was merely fulfilling his wishes. Riddle nodded. His talent was stronger than that of ordinary wizards, but he was not satisfied with it, wanting to become a celebrity like Dumbledore. He was unwilling to follow the usual path, and in order to take a shortcut, he chose to study illusion and memory magic, and expressed himself through grand illusions. It was by using this combination that he successfully stole many people's memories and successfully packaged himself. However, a good swimmer drowns in water. In his last sneak attack, he was cursed by that old wizard. He was already a flamboyant person, and this arrogance was amplified again, even interfering with his spellcasting. So he chose to stop this behavior, as he didn't have absolute certainty. But he couldn't give up fame and fortune, so he chose to become a teacher. After all, in his impression, what other job did a teacher have besides reading textbooks? Of course, there was still resentment in his heart. After all, he wanted to become the greatest person in the wizarding world, even to be recorded in history of magic, so that everyone would know him. Then I naturally had to fulfill his wish. I used some of the monster's power to unseal and strengthen Lockhart, and also taught him a highly destructive spell. However, during this period, I quietly modified his memories, blurred his thinking ability, and amplified the fantasies and desires in his mind, making him unable to distinguish between reality and illusion. In this situation, he naturally acted recklessly, spoke carelessly, bravely charged at the Ministry of Magic in public, and even spoke carelessly during his battle with you. You see, how merciful I am. I let him fulfill one of his wishes before he died, and ultimately die consciously. At this point, Riddle even sighed, looking like he was filled with compassion. I think I understand. Harley nodded. So now, you want to cooperate with me. That's right, we are both geniuses, and both young, we can completely change this wizarding world, can't we? You see, Dumbledore was easily driven out of Hogwarts by me, and the reason was simply that the Ministry of Magic was too corrupt, and some high-ranking officials were too incompetent. As pure-blood nobles, with ancient surnames, we should naturally change this wizarding world. Will you help me, Miss Harley? Riddle extended his hand to Harley, his voice very sincere. That magical temptation appeared once again, constantly trying to attract Harley. Of course, I won't. Chapter 122. This is called elegance. The moment she expressed her refusal, the spider silk on Harley pulled her rapidly backward towards the Great Hall's entrance, putting distance between her and Riddle. Several ice spears condensed in midair, spinning as they flew towards Riddle. Refused, have you? Well, I didn't expect success anyway, Riddle said with a smile, as if everything was within his control. He gently waved his wand, and an invisible wall appeared before him, blocking Harley's attack. You want to uncover certain truths and, incidentally, stall for time to see if reinforcements will arrive. But I am also waiting for Professor Lockhart's soul and body to separate. Saying this, Riddle hissed, manipulating the basilisk to charge at Harley. His wand, meanwhile, pointed at Professor Lockhart's remaining head. When a torso completely explodes, the soul can be extracted more quickly. Although Lockhart is merely a flamboyant mediocrity, he is proficient in memory magic and has been strengthened by me, so his soul is not weak. Moreover, under my deliberate concealment, his soul has no ability to resist. For my damaged self, wait, where is Lockhart's soul? For the first time, Riddle's face showed an expression of bewilderment. He suddenly looked up and let out a very loud hiss, loyal servant of Slytherin, buy me 5 minutes. Afterward, Riddle began to focus on chanting over Professor Lockhart's corpse, seemingly preparing a very complex spell. Harley wasn't too concerned with Riddle's actions, as long as she ensured he didn't launch a sneak attack on her. Anyway, Lockhart's spirit body had already been confined by her, resting peacefully in her magic mirror. If Riddle could find it, that would truly be seeing a ghost. Harley's primary goal now was to quickly kill this damned basilisk while Riddle searched for Professor Lockhart's missing soul, to avoid being attacked from both sides. The basilisk's movements were still very stiff, its speed far from what it was before, and the force of its tail strikes was also not as great. Harley guessed this was the lingering effect of the frozen world on the basilisk, as the basilisk didn't possess particularly strong cold resistance. Unfortunately, casting frozen world put too much strain on her body, and a large-scale release required Harley to borrow power from her mythical creature form. So, even the current Harley couldn't cast it multiple times in a short period. However, even without frozen world, the witch's control over ice could still be freely utilized. Harley waved her wand, and countless frosty spears appeared, madly stabbing at the basilisk. The ice cones were also imbued with the witch's curses, such as sharpness, bleeding, and unhealable wounds. Although none were powerful curses and could only inflict minor damage on the basilisk, they were enough to disrupt it. After all, the basilisk repeatedly spat out only words like, kill, and, tear, suggesting a low intelligence. At the same time, Harley also released disease abilities, causing the wounds to quickly become inflamed and inflict more damage. As expected, under Harley's dense attacks, the basilisk's massive body was utterly unable to dodge. It quickly bled profusely, falling into a deeper state of madness, which allowed more spears to easily hit vital areas. The basilisk began to writhe wildly on the ground, slamming its massive body against the floor, attempting to alleviate the pain. Watching the basilisk's blood flow, Harley felt a strange pang of heartache. That was her spoils of war. Despite the slight heartache, Harley didn't hesitate, using spider silk to control several spears to repeatedly attack the bleeding spots, further tearing the wounds. 2 more minutes, Harley mused silently. I need to deal with the basilisk within 2 minutes, otherwise Lord Voldemort will stop that magic and join the fight. Thinking this, Harley no longer hesitated, even if it meant damaging some materials. She directly used the spider silk to float from midair onto the basilisk's head. The basilisk was still frantically rolling and shaking. Although a person had landed on its head, it was completely unaware. Harnessing the assassin's physical enhancements and gripping an ice spear embedded in the scales on the basilisk's head, Harley stabilized herself. Her left hand rested on the wound on the basilisk's head, into which she inserted a piece of a wand shard, while softly chanting. Bribery weaken. Distortion perception. Law of all things, large-bodied creatures are forbidden here. Judgment. Harley activated most of the abilities of 2 sealed artifacts on her body in one go. Because it possessed little intelligence, the basilisk was completely unable to evade the effects of these extraordinary abilities. And being in such close proximity to Harley, the effects of the law of all things and judgment abilities were maximized. The basilisk let out a tragic shriek, its defenses already breached by the ice spears, and then marked face to face by bribery. The basilisk's skin's magic resistance was almost non-existent. Under these circumstances, the law of all things directly marked it as a criminal, and the judgment domain could directly inflict heavy damage within a 10-meter radius. In that instant, the basilisk painfully closed its eyes, feeling as if a rolling pin was frantically stirring inside its head. Goodbye, become materials. Harley sneered, injecting more spirituality into the ice spear she held in her right hand, and plunged it downward with force. The basilisk's skin and flesh were like paper, easily pierced by the spear. Blood gushed from the wound, and the basilisk ceased its wailing. Its head, which had been raised high in pain, crashed heavily onto the floor. Rest in peace. Harley quickly moved away from the basilisk using the spider silk, preventing blood from splattering onto her. She pulled out the handkerchief from her pocket and gently wiped her hands. Exactly 2 minutes, not a second more, not a second less. This is called elegance. At this moment, Riddle finally finished his magic, his face contorted with savagery. He had schemed for so long, driven away Dumbledore, misled Lockhart, drained 12 gnomes, and devoured many Muggle lives during the holidays. He had sacrificed so much, all just to resurrect on Easter, to usurp control and become the main body, hadn't he? But now, the most crucial ingredient for his resurrection ritual, Lockhart's soul, had gone missing. Without this ingredient, his incomplete soul simply couldn't support the resurrection ritual he had prepared. After all, Riddle had been in the diary for over 50 years. Although he had absorbed a lot of life force and magic, most of it had been used up. He was now even weaker than Lord Voldemort's main soul fragment. Riddle wasn't a fool. He quickly remembered Harley's strange actions in front of Lockhart's corpse earlier. You used that strange mirror earlier to steal Lockhart's soul. Riddle's gaze, filled with murderous intent, fixed on Harley, who was suspended in midair. Of course, dear Mr. Riddle. Harley bowed slightly with the help of the spider silk. Professor Lockhart's soul is still quite useful to me, so please forgive me for not being able to hand him over to you. What a waste. If I had known, I wouldn't have erased the thoughts of this stupid snake just to hide the dark arts left by Slytherin. Riddle cursed as he looked at the basilisk's corpse, then gazed towards the sky. It's fine, I'll just kill you and take it then. Chapter 123 Goodbye, Senior Riddle. Riddle was running out of time. His current body was merely an accumulation of life force and couldn't last much longer. Therefore, Riddle had to quickly kill Harley, obtain Lockhart's soul, and begin the resurrection ritual. So he no longer spouted crazy nonsense like before. He raised his hand and unleashed a killing move. The Slytherin long table, covered in ice and snow, transformed directly into a giant python, viciously lunging at Harley. Under the cover of the giant python, the tip of Riddle's wand emitted black fiendfire. The ferocious flames, radiating an evil aura, surged and spread, attacking Harley from all directions. "Lockhart didn't teach you anything useful at the dueling club," Riddle said, not forgetting to verbally interfere with Harley while controlling the fiendfire. "Let me give you a lesson, and the tuition fee is your life and soul. Would you die if you didn't talk? Do you need me to lend you a ball?" Harley retorted, as black flame also appeared around her body, dancing. The black flame converged into a wave of fire, rushing towards the fiendfire and the giant python. However, despite their fierce momentum, they could only barely resist the fiendfire. As for the giant python, with a single agile flip, it dodged Harley's attack. Harley's expression darkened, and the spider silk pulled her slender waist, lifting her into the air once more. "It's useless. Do you really think I can't fight in the air?" Riddle sneered, lightly flicking his wand. Wings suddenly sprouted from the giant python's back, and it soared into the sky. "Bombarda!" Harley waved her wand, and several exploding curses flew out, blasting the giant python in midair into two pieces. Avada Kedavra! Riddle reacted swiftly, casting the killing curse the instant the explosion occurred. A green light, concealed by the remnants of the giant snake, rapidly flew towards Harley. However, Harley had also been closely watching Riddle's every move. The spider silk wrapped around her left wrist suddenly yanked downwards, helping her dodge the fatal blow. Riddle sneered, raising his wand, preparing to cast the Avada Kedavra curse again. But he suddenly coughed. Riddle was momentarily stunned. Why would he cough? The disease has taken effect. The sharp-eyed Harley naturally didn't miss this detail. Earlier, when approaching Lockhart, Harley had used her superb control over her extraordinary abilities to leave a pathogen on his head. Although the effect of this pathogen wasn't particularly strong, prolonged exposure to its vicinity would also lead to infection. And Riddle, in his search for Lockhart's soul, had stayed in front of his head for more than 5 minutes earlier. The fact that he was only now starting to cough was due to Riddle's body being constructed from pure life force and magic, making it difficult for diseases from the extraordinary domain to invade. "Since the disease has taken effect, let me give you another strong dose." Harley casually pulled out her magic mirror, and sharp spider silk cut across her delicate shoulder, allowing a few drops of blood to fall onto the magic mirror. "Curse," Harley whispered, quickly sketching various images on the magic mirror in a matter of seconds, then letting them seep into the mirror. A gray light shot from the magic mirror into the void, then merged into Riddle's body, giving him no time to react. Cough, cough, cough. The disease on Riddle's body instantly worsened. He felt as if his lungs wanted to burn, and his breathing became increasingly difficult. His skin began to itch, and small red bumps appeared, bringing waves of pain. Harley sneered, rapidly approaching Riddle. The previous curse had somewhat enhanced the disease on Riddle and slightly lowered his physical attributes. Although neither change was significant, Riddle had been exposed to the pathogen for a long time previously, and many hidden dangers had already lurked within his body. Under the curse, these hidden dangers erupted instantaneously. While the disease which didn't possess particularly powerful single-target instant kill methods, in terms of sustained combat, she was absolutely second to none. Harley was ready. Once she was within 10 meters of Riddle, she would unleash another frozen world, combined with ice spears and exploding curses, to directly kill him. But before Harley could get close to Riddle, Riddle self-destructed. His body suddenly exploded, but there was no blood or other fragments, only countless dust particles. Not far away, the fiendfire, which was struggling with the black flame, instantly exploded and spread in all directions, as if out of control. At the same time, a green light suddenly emerged from the basilisk's abdomen, and then a slit opened. A diary flew out, emitting a crystal-clear green glow that rapidly outlined a new body. Riddle was reborn there. What interesting dark arts. It's a pity your opponent is the greatest dark wizard in history. His power is beyond your imagination. Riddle opened his tightly shut eyes and said in a cold voice. Although he had lost his wand, he showed no panic. After all, a wand had always been merely a tool to assist his spellcasting. It was good to have it, but it didn't matter if he didn't. After all, Riddle had learned the technique of wandless spellcasting as early as his 4th year, and by the time he created this diary, he could even barely cast the wandless killing curse. Harley didn't retort. Instead, she waved her wand. Fumos. Smoke instantly appeared and covered the entire Great Hall within 5 seconds. Under the cover of the smoke, Harley continuously cast multiple exploding curses in the direction she had been facing. Then, like a nimble female leopard, she deftly leapt over the scattered long table fragments and chair pieces on the ground, pouncing towards Riddle. If killing him once isn't enough, then kill him twice. Moreover, she had already figured out most of Riddle's combat methods: remote control of Transmigration to interfere with Harley's movement, followed by a killing curse or fiendfire curse for a direct kill. It was very effective, but it could only bully the weak. Indeed, facing the smoke, Riddle seemed a bit flustered. Although he always appeared fearless, no matter how strong the killing curse was, it still needed a visible target. And now, with the smoke billowing, Riddle couldn't cast a chain-killing curse. He had tried to research this magic, but he still hadn't mastered it by the time he created this diary. Perhaps his adult self had researched it, or perhaps not, but in any case, his current self didn't know it. Coupled with Harley's previously agile movements, it had left a deep impression on Riddle. Although he despised such crude Muggle methods from the bottom of his heart, Riddle also knew that once Harley got close, he would simply be beaten to death. Riddle now had only one choice. Layers of black fiendfire once again surged from his body, but Riddle's body also blurred slightly. Perhaps for this reason, the fiendfire did not spread wantonly but tightly protected him. As long as I can pinpoint Harley's location, I can kill her with one blow. Riddle made his judgment. But he didn't wait for Harley's close-range attack from a certain direction, he only felt a large amount of spider silk. Although these spider silks were useless and instantly burned to ashes by the fiendfire, they also exposed his defense. Before Riddle could react, he suddenly felt the world change. Harley opened her pale lips in the mist, letting out an invisible scream. The ethereal blue halo reappeared, and wherever it went, frost condensed. Harley endured the pain in her mind and the potential loss of control, borrowing more power from her mythical creature form. So this time, the frozen world directly suppressed the fiendfire, leaving Riddle utterly unable to resist. In just 1 or 2 seconds, the area around both of them transformed into thick, transparent ice, covered with soft white frost on the outside. To ensure maximum power, Harley didn't even control this power to avoid herself, opting for an indiscriminate attack. However, Harley wouldn't harm herself. A smile appeared on her charming and radiant face, and black flame ignited from inside her body. The flames melted the surrounding frost, allowing Harley to break free from her restraints. "Goodbye, Senior Riddle," Harley whispered, her hands not stopping for a moment. An ice spear pierced into the congealed ice, striking Riddle's heart. This body disintegrated, leaving behind a black-covered diary. Power continuously surged from the diary, attempting to outline a body again, to bring a certain existence back into the world. But it was futile, because cold air constantly spread from the spear, ensuring the diary was firmly suppressed. The battle ended. Chapter 124. The old man is very bad. Harley's fingertips continuously emitted cold air, causing the ice around the diary to rapidly thicken. At the same time, the magic mirror hovered above Harley's head. Harley poured a large amount of spiritual energy into it, activating the runes on the mirror's edge. Simultaneously, gray, evil-smelling rays of light surged from the mirror's surface, then plunged into the solid ice, performing various simple sealing rituals. Harley had prepared many strange curses for Senior Riddle. If he wanted to emerge from the diary again, he would surely be very happy. Of course, if anyone tried to break the ice without Harley's permission, they could also enjoy the witch's curse in place of Senior Riddle. After doing all this, Harley said softly without raising her head, "Dear Professor, can you not be so elusive? It's very scary and not at all friendly to a young girl. And you almost interfered with my previous battle." "I apologize," an old voice responded, "but judging by the outcome, it seems I didn't completely affect you either." After completing the sealing of the diary, Harley put away the magic mirror, holding the ice ball in one hand and her wand in the other, and turned around. The Great Hall was still a mess, all the doors tightly closed, shimmering with a special magic glow. The basilisk's corpse and Professor Lockhart's remains lay on the distant floor, chairs and tables all shattered, covered in thick frost. But there was still something unusual in the Great Hall. On the teacher's dais, the previously shattered long table and chairs had been repaired at some unknown time. An old man sat in the center seat of the long table, with a golden red bird perched on his shoulder. It was Dumbledore. The old man smiled at Harley, raised a hand, and greeted, "Long time no see, Miss Harley." "Dear Professor, long time no see," Harley curtsied slightly, "it's good to see you return to Hogwarts." Then, Harley casually tossed the ice ball towards Professor Dumbledore. Dumbledore lightly waved his hand, and the ice ball stopped in midair. "Fox, take it back to the headmaster's office and guard it strictly. Don't let anyone touch it," Dumbledore said with a solemn expression. Fox let out a long cry, grabbed the ice ball, and vanished without a trace. Then, Dumbledore looked at Harley again. "After all, I felt someone might need my help," Dumbledore said with a chuckle. The feather fox gave you sensed danger, so I rushed back. But by the time he successfully brought me into the Great Hall, the danger had already been eliminated by you. Yes, and you also inadvertently caused some trouble, Harley said with a smile, complaining. When you came in, you just entered my magic range, and Fox even used fire to contend with my magic. This caused my magic power to be overconsumed in that instant, and I almost failed to trap Senior Riddle. Senior Riddle. Dumbledore's face showed some awkwardness, deliberately avoiding Harley's words. It seems Tom told you his former name. I'm quite curious now about what happened earlier. If you don't mind, I think we can have a good chat in our free time later. Okay, Professor, Harley replied, then looked at the Great Hall's main door. Professor, can you break the magic on it? Also, the magic on it hasn't been removed, how did you get in? Don't tell me you came in through the sewer pipes, like the basilisk. Of course not, I just got a little help from the Phoenix. Tom's magic couldn't block the Phoenix's apparition. Dumbledore smiled, stood up, drew his wand, pointed it at the Great Hall's ceiling, and simultaneously sighed. I never thought Tom could use the power of Hogwarts Castle to seal the Great Hall while I was away. I wonder if he's exceptionally gifted, finding a loophole in just 7 years, or if Slytherin left some back doors for his heir in the Chamber of Secrets. A golden light flew from Professor Dumbledore's wand tip to the ceiling, then spread out. For a moment, the entire Great Hall was enveloped in a golden glow, appearing magnificent. The magic on the main and side doors of the Great Hall quickly dissipated. Before Harley could say anything else, the door suddenly exploded with a boom. The poor door, like the tables and chairs, ultimately could not escape the fate of being destroyed. A group of blindfolded wizards, dressed uniformly, rushed in. They all held wands and adopted a defensive formation. But upon seeing Harley and Dumbledore standing there, and noticing the massive corpse of the basilisk, everyone froze. The leading wizard was the first to tear off his blindfold, put on a pair of gold-rimmed glasses, and commanded, "The basilisk is dead, you can lower your blindfolds." Harley carefully observed the man before her, with his brown hair, resembling an old lion. She suddenly remembered that this person seemed to be Rufus Scrimgeour of the Auror office, who had appeared in newspapers before. Then those behind him should be the Aurors with the super-sensory charm. It seemed that after realizing he couldn't enter the Great Hall quickly, Shacklebolt chose to inform the Ministry of Magic, while Professor McGonagall contacted Professor Dumbledore. No wonder Professor Dumbledore came even though Harley hadn't used that feather. The old man was very sly, even lying to Harley that he sensed her danger through the feather. What a liar. What happened, Albus? After all the Auror captains or elite members had removed their blindfolds, Scrimgeour looked at Professor Dumbledore. Kingsley just contacted me in a panic, saying someone was fighting Harley Potter in the Great Hall, and a threatening basilisk had appeared in Hogwarts Castle. He originally wanted to reinforce, but found the Great Hall sealed by unknown magic, so he had to contact me. Now I've rushed here with many elites, and everything's already over. Also, what's the situation with this chaotic Hogwarts Great Hall? Professor Dumbledore glanced at Harley and replied softly, "You should ask Miss Harley. After all, when I arrived, she had already ended this battle by herself." So everyone's gaze focused on Harley, most with expressions of shock and doubt. The scene in the Great Hall was now horrific. The basilisk had numerous wounds on its body. And Professor Lockhart, who had previously used brutal means to instantly kill an Auror, his head had just been noticed, his face looking as if he died with his eyes wide open. Everything indicated to everyone that a terrifying battle had taken place here. Many, putting themselves in the situation, realized that if they had encountered this, they would probably have died instantly. And now you're saying the final winner of this battle is a 12-year-old girl. What a joke. Professor Dumbledore, this is no time for jokes. Scrimgeour's tone changed slightly, and his address went from Albus to Professor Dumbledore. Unless you provide evidence, I can't believe all this was done by a mere 12-year-old witch. After all, I am the head of the Auror office, and everything must be based on evidence. And if I recall correctly, as the principal recognized by Hogwarts Castle, you should be able to provide footage of the previous battle. Harley looked at Dumbledore in shock. This old man is so mischievous. He knew everything, yet he wanted her to tell him personally. It seemed Harley's prepared statement needed further consideration. But her judgment was indeed correct, this old man was very sly. Chapter 125, Political Magic. Of course, I have proof, Dumbledore said with a smile, but he didn't make a decision immediately. Actually, I don't mind if you credit all of this to me, but I don't want to steal Harley's thunder, so I still need to ask for her opinion. Harley, would you be willing to let the head of the Auror office see the previous footage? Dumbledore looked at Harley. Harley was slightly startled. In her understanding, Aurors were equivalent to night guards or the heart of machinery. Although they weren't as formidable in combat as the former two, their status was equal. If the Orthodox churches wanted to view combat footage of Wild Beyonders, could you really rush over and tell them no? Unless you had the ability to fight your way up and even kill all the Sequence Zero true gods. And now, not yet an angel, Harley felt she didn't have the ability to take down the Ministry of Magic by herself. After all, who knew what hidden trump cards an ancient power that had ruled an entire nation for such a long time might possess? Plus, she still wanted to stay at Hogwarts for school, so she was indifferent to the Aurors' desire to view the combat footage. Anyway, among the combat methods she had already used, the two sealed artifacts she employed, and her praying to the mythical creature form for power, none of it could possibly be discerned from the footage alone. And her core abilities, such as manipulation of joy and various other emotions, she hadn't used at all in this battle. So, the Ministry of Magic would at most only learn that she was skilled in ice and fire magic, without touching upon Harley's core abilities. Even if someone painstakingly acquired this information and tried to use it against her, it would be a fool's errand. Therefore, Harley wasn't particularly concerned about whether this footage would be leaked. Nevertheless, Professor Dumbledore's willingness to ask Harley beforehand still stirred an inexplicable emotion in her heart. If you're not too willing, you can also let Director Scrimgeour watch it alone, Dumbledore added when Harley didn't answer immediately. Of course, not letting him watch is also fine, but according to Ministry of Magic law and common social sense, your killing of the Basilisk and the heir of Slytherin will then only be credited to me. And if this matter is written into your resume, it will be of no small help for finding a job after graduation. At least, Auror positions would absolutely welcome you. That's true. If all of this was indeed done by Miss Harley, I would welcome her to join us immediately after graduation, Scrimgeour nodded in agreement. Upon hearing Professor Dumbledore's words, many Aurors frowned slightly. As elites among the Aurors, many of them captains, they were also very curious about the previous battle scene and eager to observe it. But the one speaking was Dumbledore, the greatest white wizard of all time, so they could only regret that they might miss this opportunity. As for Scrimgeour's words, they were indifferent, as strength had always been respected among Aurors. I don't mind, Harley said obediently, it's not important footage anyway. Mr. Scrimgeour, if you and others want to watch, then watch. There was one more thing Harley didn't say, this was a great opportunity to create an anchor. Professor Dumbledore nodded and gently waved his wand. The blue sky on the ceiling disappeared, and the footage began to play, from when Harley and Professor Lockhart started fighting until the basilisk was killed. However, the footage regarding Tom Riddle was erased and modified to show Lockhart ordering the basilisk to kill Harley just before his death. Although she didn't know why Professor Dumbledore wanted to conceal this important information, since the professor didn't want others to know, Harley wouldn't actively choose to expose it. After watching, the Great Hall was in a dead silence, so quiet that one could even hear an Auror's shocked gasp. Scrimgeour was the first to recover, his face still showing disbelief. Miss Harley, I must say, your strength is truly remarkable. I wonder if you would be willing to join the Auror ranks after graduation. I imagine you could quickly become a captain, and even have a chance to take over my position after I step down. You might not know, the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. He hadn't finished speaking when he was interrupted by Dumbledore's cough. Rufus, I don't think now is the time for this. Indeed, now is not the time for this. A new voice interjected, it was Minister for Magic Fudge. After confirming the Great Hall was safe earlier, Scrimgeour had sent an Auror to notify Minister Fudge and Professor McGonagall, who were waiting outside. Actually, Professor McGonagall really wanted to go in with the Aurors, but Fudge found all sorts of excuses to keep Professor McGonagall outside. And upon receiving the notification, Fudge rushed in, only to happen upon the live-action movie playing on the ceiling, so he only spoke up now. Seeing Minister Fudge's serious expression, most of the Aurors wisely left to tidy up the mess in the Great Hall. Professor McGonagall also went to direct, leaving only Harley, Dumbledore, Fudge, and Scrimgeour. Albus, this is all finally resolved, Fudge said, wiping sweat with a handkerchief and panting. Tonight I can finally get a good night's sleep, although the Higgs, but all in all, it's still pretty good. However, I think, Albus, you probably need to go to the Ministry of Magic again soon. The Higgs family has acquired fresh mandrakes, so the child has already woken up. As soon as he woke up, he accused the House of Malfoy, saying that Draco Malfoy attacked him. Honestly, it's really hard to believe, isn't it? The House of Malfoy is the most traditional pure-blood noble family, I don't believe they would do such a thing. And the footage on the ceiling earlier also said that Lockhart was very good at modifying memories. I suspect he manipulated young Malfoy. But you need to go and see, and also discuss with the Board of Governors to revoke your dismissal notice. Fudge prattled on for a long time, all about political matters, constantly seeking Dumbledore's help and expressing his helplessness. It wasn't until Dumbledore nodded, indicating he would go to the Ministry of Magic with him, that Fudge stopped talking. Harley, Fudge's mouth couldn't stay idle. Having just finished his conversation with Dumbledore, he shifted his target. He looked at Harley eagerly, but in the deepest part of his eyes, a hint of vigilance and other inexplicable emotions were hidden. Oh, my dear child, I never expected you to solve such a big problem. You don't know how much you've helped me, truly thank you. It's what I should do, Minister Fudge. Harley bowed slightly in response. Oh, child, don't be so modest, Fudge said loudly, his voice echoing in the Great Hall. In my opinion, you are already not much worse than Albus in his day, and you might even surpass him. He didn't have the ability to single-handedly kill a basilisk and a powerful dark wizard in his second year. I think we can arrange an exclusive interview for you regarding this matter and report it thoroughly in the Daily Prophet, don't you think? Of course, Minister Fudge, Harley replied softly, not waiting for Dumbledore to speak. I think your name could also be in it, couldn't it? Minister Fudge arranged for Aurors to be stationed at Hogwarts, forcing the heir of Slytherin to reveal himself. Dumbledore, who had been smiling, now had a somewhat complex expression, while Scrimgeour's mouth hung slightly open in astonishment. This 12-year-old girl was not only so formidable in combat, but her political acumen was also incredibly high. She was practically born to enter the Ministry of Magic. Scrimgeour would bet his favorite lion-like hair that if Harley maintained her current status and entered the Ministry of Magic after graduation, she would very likely succeed Fudge as Minister for Magic after he stepped down. Is this what a genius is? Chapter 126 It's all the stupid lion's fault. Fudge's expression grew increasingly triumphant, and the wariness in his eyes gradually faded with Harley's words. Oh, my dear child, you mustn't say that. Most of the credit still belongs to you. Of course, I did make some contributions, didn't I? Thanks to my brilliant arrangements. You're right, I should contact the Daily Prophet and arrange for a couple of well-known reporters. This matter can be front-page news, and it can run for several days, reassuring the wizards of the wizarding world. Fudge's voice grew softer and softer, but the expression on his face became increasingly excited. Cornelius. Dumbledore called softly, pulling Fudge back to reality. Oh, Albus. Fudge snapped back, the expression still on his face. What else is there? I think everything is settled, isn't it? Dumbledore didn't mind Fudge's slip-up, his blue eyes fixed on Fudge. The heir of Slytherin is Gilderoy Lockhart. He tampered with many people's memories and infiltrated Hogwarts Castle, releasing the basilisk. And Harley killed the basilisk and the heir of Slytherin. All of this is well documented, and Hagrid is innocent and should be released. As for anything else, I think we should go to the Ministry of Magic now. Of course, we still have a pile of things to do. Fudge suddenly remembered the mountain of tasks, and the conflict between two pure-blood families, and couldn't help but get a headache again. Especially Hagrid, that big oaf wouldn't be easy to deal with. After all, he hadn't listened to Dumbledore and had sent Hagrid directly to Azkaban. Now he still had to appease him, and restore his reputation. Luckily, there was Harley, who effectively alleviated his political pressure. Thinking of this, Fudge's admiration for Harley grew. If it weren't for Fudge himself wanting to emulate former Minister for Magic Ferrus Spavin, serving for 40 years straight, outliving his undersecretary, and even surpassing him. And Harley might snatch his position. Then Fudge would really want to recruit Harley as an administrative assistant after she graduated. Rufus, you lead the Aurors to clear the scene and take away the criminal evidence. Fudge stopped thinking and instructed Scrimgeour beside him. But before he could finish, Harley suddenly spoke up. Minister Fudge, I killed this basilisk alone, and it is property left behind by Slytherin. So I think it should remain at Hogwarts for the professors at the school to research. Harley was very clever. If she insisted on taking the basilisk for herself, the Ministry of Magic would definitely interfere, and there would be negative public opinion. But by leaving the basilisk in the name of Hogwarts, could she still not use the materials from the basilisk? Anyway, these materials would probably all be supplied to Professor Snape. Other professors would at most take a little for research, so by approximation, the basilisk was hers. When he heard Harley's words, a hint of reluctance flashed across Fudge's face. After all, there weren't many basilisks left in the wizarding world now. At least, openly, this kind of dark arts creature was extinct. Although he didn't know what a basilisk was good for, those potions masters would surely be very happy to research it. So, no matter how he looked at it, this basilisk corpse could fetch a good price. However, the property left by Slytherin should legally belong to Hogwarts, and Fudge had no reason to interfere. Moreover, Fudge still had a lot of political trouble and urgently needed Dumbledore's support and Harley's cooperation. So he was unwilling to go too far and cause conflict with the two of them. After all, if he couldn't earn galleons this time, there would be other opportunities, but if he lost the position of Minister for Magic, it would be truly lost. Besides, as long as he was still the Minister for Magic, galleons would be easy to obtain. Just from this incident, if he really helped Lucius solve his trouble, he could earn tens of thousands of galleons. Thinking of this, Fudge made a decision. You're right, my dear child. Scrimgeour, just take photos for evidence. Try to preserve the basilisk's body intact. We'll need people from the Daily Prophet to take pictures with it later. Let's go, Cornelius. Dumbledore had been silent, but now he urged again, subtly glancing at Harley. Harley resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Was Professor Dumbledore so afraid of her getting involved in politics? He was so eager to take Minister Fudge away. Dumbledore and the other quickly left the Great Hall, leaving only the Aurors taking photos everywhere. Miss Harley, I never imagined you were so outstanding. I hope you'll have the opportunity to work for me. Scrimgeour couldn't help but exclaim and extend an invitation when he was alone with Harley. Thank you for your compliment, Mr. Scrimgeour, Harley said sweetly. If possible, I will consider it. The two said nothing more. Scrimgeour went to direct the Aurors, while Harley lowered her presence and went to Professor Lockhart's side. When she had activated her spiritual vision earlier, Harley noticed that Professor Lockhart's glasses also looked quite valuable. So she prepared to quietly loot the body. Anyway, the wizarding world didn't have this custom, and even if someone later discovered the glasses were missing, they probably wouldn't care too much. After putting away the glasses, Harley resumed her harmless, obedient student appearance, watching the Aurors busy themselves. The professors had just received notice from Professor McGonagall and had now entered the Great Hall. They would work together to collect the basilisk, which would be used as evidence later. However, the basilisk blood and venom inside needed to be collected fresh to avoid waste, so the professors had quite a lot of work to do. But Professor Snape, who should have been the most excited, was now glowering. No one had told him that Lily's child was fighting alone against a cunning and disgusting dark wizard and a dangerous basilisk. It was simply blatant discrimination against him. And Harley, why did she have to be as foolish as that damned James Potter? It must be the stupid lions of Gryffindor influencing her. It was all the stupid lions' fault. Thinking of this, Professor Snape was seething with anger, wishing he could give Harley an extra 500 points and then deduct 600 points from Gryffindor. Various thoughts flashed through Professor Snape's mind, but his movements were not slow at all. He quickly came to Harley's front, casually pulled 2 potions from his wizard robe pocket, handed them over, and asked, "Miss Harley, are you all right?" Professor Snape's voice was cold, but it couldn't hide the deep concern within. "Thank you for your concern, Professor." Harley naturally took the potions and replied softly, "That air was just a waste, and the basilisk venom was very weak, it didn't cause me any trouble at all." There were many wizards around, so Professor Snape maintained his poker face, only nodding slightly. "I understand. When you go to detention again, you'll have to explain it to me properly. These 2 potions contain phoenix tears and have antidotal and healing properties, drink them. Also, you should go back to your dormitory to rest immediately, I will inform Professor McGonagall." Professor Snape spoke very quickly, as if not wanting anyone to hear his inner worry. Harley nodded, she was also feeling a bit tired. After bidding farewell to the professor, Harley slipped out the side door alone. Chapter 127 Do you know how worried I am? After watching Harley leave, Professor Snape shook his head and then came to the basilisk. Professor Sprout and Professor Flitwick were dissecting the basilisk, removing materials that required special preservation. Seeing Professor Snape approach, Professor Flitwick smiled and said, "Have you appeased Harley?" "She doesn't need me to appease her, she's much stronger than most students." Professor Snape muttered softly, "Yes, she is Lily's child after all." Professor Sprout also teased him. 3 of the 4 deans had taught Professor Snape's year, all of them seasoned professors. So, the deans had heard about Professor Snape's time as a student. Professor Snape's poker face instantly fell, and he pretended not to hear Professor Sprout's words, instead changing the subject. According to Albus, these materials should go to Harley, as they are her spoils of war alone. However, as the potion class professor, I will temporarily keep them for her. The other deans had no objection to this, as none of them had any need for the materials from the basilisk. I don't know how Harley managed to do it. Professor Flitwick, who hadn't witnessed the earlier breathtaking spectacle, exclaimed. But this child must have a great talent for combat. It seems I can invite Harley for duel training and then take her to participate in the International Wizarding Duel Competition, to relive my past glory. That can't take up my time. Professor Snape's tone suddenly became tense. Hogwarts hasn't won the Magical School Potion Championship in a long time, she should focus on this competition first. What are you afraid of? Professor Flitwick sealed a bottle full of basilisk blood with a charms and said casually. The tournament starts this summer, and the International Wizarding Duel Competition isn't until her 4th year's summer. Harley had no idea about the professor's conversation. After using her invisibility to sneak back to the Gryffindor common room, Harley dodged the dense crowd of students in the common room and returned to her dormitory. The dormitory was empty, but Harley didn't care. After a quick wash, she lay directly on her bed. Logically, Harley should have been reviewing the battle. But after fighting for so long, Harley felt very tired. Anyway, Professor Dumbledore still had to talk to her, so she might as well let him help her review it then. Harley slept straight through until past 8 in the evening before waking up. When she opened her eyes, Harley was startled. What the hell? She clearly pulled the bed curtain shut before she went to sleep. But what was this brown mass in front of her, like the mythical creature form of a warlock? Harley vigorously patted her head before realizing that what was above her was Hermione's hair. The little witch now had a resentful look on her face, glaring fiercely at Harley. Harley, you actually went and did such a dangerous thing alone. Huh, what happened? I didn't, don't talk nonsense. Harley instinctively replied. You still want to quibble? Professor McGonagall has told us everything, and now everyone in the school knows that you single-handedly killed the basilisk and defeated the dark wizard Lockhart. Hermione said, puffing out her cheeks, staring hard at Harley with her small eyes. You actually ran off to do something so dangerous by yourself. I wondered why I couldn't find you when I returned to the dormitory. Do you know how worried I was? You're my only friend. As she spoke, Hermione's eyes reddened slightly. Harley stretched, and taking advantage of Hermione's unguarded state, skillfully pressed Hermione's head down. Hermione was startled and was about to struggle when she heard Harley's lazy voice. Don't talk, I'm very tired, let me lie down a bit longer. Hermione was a bit angry, but she didn't move again. She just rolled over, kicked off her slippers, and climbed up too. The dormitory was silent for a while, then Hermione spoke. That huge basilisk, did you really kill it by yourself? Of course. Harley rolled over, but then felt a bit uncomfortable in her chest, so she rolled back again. What did the professors say in the Great Hall earlier? Tell me about it, I'm a bit curious. Nothing important. Hermione's expression became serious. It's just that the professors returned to their respective houses and announced that everything had been resolved by you. The so-called Slytherin heir who opened the Chamber of Secrets was Professor Lockhart. Oh, he's not a professor anymore. Anyway, he had always been disguising the fact that he was an evil dark wizard. As for the anti-dark arts deeds he claimed, they were all stolen experiences from others. And you defeated him alone in the Great Hall, and also single-handedly killed Slytherin's monster, a huge, 1,000-year-old basilisk. And Professor Lockhart, knowing escape was hopeless, chose to commit suicide with evil dark arts, leaving only his head. At this point, Hermione shivered, clearly unable to forget Professor Lockhart's blood-stained head. Harley was stunned, then realized this was the professor's embellished explanation. After all, if they told the little wizards that she had personally killed Professor Lockhart, it would more or less give others a bad impression. Poor Professor Lockhart, as the only villain who died, he naturally had to take all the blame. Even his method of death couldn't be known, and he would be repeatedly criticized in the future. Alright, I'm starving, I'm going to the kitchen to get something to eat. Do you want to come along? Harley stretched, suddenly realizing she hadn't changed her clothes yet. Oh, right, before I go, I also need to take a shower and change into a fresh robe. I'm not going. Hermione sat up and refused. After such a big event, the professors will definitely want to talk to you. Although Harley didn't say it, the clever Hermione naturally understood that after such a major event, the professors wouldn't just sit idly by. Since that was the case, she wouldn't disturb Harley from her important business. Besides, your bedsheets need changing. Hermione pointed to the bed, where the quilt was mixed with frost, dust, and blood. I'll help you change them right away. I even brought a spare set of sheets and a duvet cover. As she said this, Hermione's eyes looked down, her cheeks a little flushed. Harley chuckled softly and ruffled Hermione's hair. Then I'll rely on you, my dear Miss Granger. I'll take my leave now, I'll tell you the details of my battle tomorrow. After thoroughly washing off the smell of blood and the scent of battle, Harley had a hearty meal in the kitchen. Ah, that feels good. I wonder if Professor Dumbledore is back yet. Should I go near the headmaster's office and ask a portrait? Harley pondered as she walked upstairs. However, Harley soon found out whether the principal had returned. Because Fawkes suddenly appeared in midair, then landed on Harley's shoulder. Good evening, Fawkes. Why are you here? Has Professor Dumbledore returned? Harley stroked Fawkes' feathers. Did Professor Dumbledore ask you to bring me over? Fawkes nodded, letting out a soft cry. Then let's go. The person and the bird transformed into a ball of fire and vanished on the stairs. When they reappeared, the two had already arrived in the headmaster's office. Chapter 128 Do you want eternal life? Everything in the headmaster's office was as usual, with no signs of any items being moved. It seemed Professor Dumbledore was confident in his return, so he hadn't considered moving at all. At this moment, Professor Dumbledore was sitting behind the desk, fingers interlocked, a benevolent smile on his face. The former principals in the portraits weren't even pretending to sleep. Instead, they were visiting each other's portraits, celebrating Professor Dumbledore's return. Good evening, dear Professor Dumbledore, Harley greeted him proactively, while Fawkes gently flapped his wings and returned to his perch. Good evening, Harley. Would you like some milk? Professor Dumbledore waved his wand, and a chair appeared out of thin air. No, thank you. I just had a big meal in the kitchen. That's good, Dumbledore nodded gently. I called you tonight mainly to discuss your battle this afternoon. Although I've seen the footage, I'd still like to hear your first-person account of what exactly happened this afternoon. Harley didn't hesitate and immediately began to narrate according to the story she had already prepared in the kitchen. After all, the old man in front of her had footage of her battle, so most of the information didn't need to be hidden. After listening to Harley's words, Professor Dumbledore nodded. Harley, thank you for resolving the crisis at Hogwarts. Therefore, I want to express my gratitude to you. I believe you deserve a Hogwarts Special Contribution Award. Also, I have good news for you. You might receive a second-class Order of Merlin for killing the basilisk and protecting your classmates. After all, there's a precedent for this. In 18, Mr. Derrick single-handedly killed a dragon to protect a Muggle village and received a third-class Order of Merlin. Given your age and special status, I think you might even receive a second-class medal and have the opportunity to compete for the position of Britain's youth representative in the Wizengamot. The old man's voice was very calm, as if he was performing some routine duty. However, several old principals on the wall suddenly applauded, seemingly very excited. If Harley remembered correctly, they were all principals who had graduated from Gryffindor. No wonder the other principals nearby were rolling their eyes. Professor, do you seem a bit unhappy about this? Harley didn't pay too much attention to the old principal's reactions but tentatively asked Professor Dumbledore. Unhappy? No, dear Harley, I am proud of you. If your parents knew of your achievements now, I think they would also be proud of you. Dumbledore shook his head. I'm just a little worried, a worry based on things that happened to me in the past. Harley, what I'm about to say isn't as principal, but as an old man who was very close to your grandfather and parents. I hope you can stay away from politics as much as possible, and even if you get close to politics, don't let yourself be tainted by the filth in the Ministry of Magic. Also, although you have achieved a series of statuses at a young age, I hope you don't become complacent or even arrogant because of these honors. Although it wasn't a lengthy speech, just 2 simple sentences, Harley immediately understood Professor Dumbledore's concerns. Despite her short time interacting with the Ministry of Magic, Harley had already recognized Fudge's incompetence, lack of foresight, and greed. If the Minister for Magic was like this, how good could the people below him be? The Ministry of Magic, having been controlled by pure-blood families for so long, was probably rotten from the roots. Although she didn't understand what Professor Dumbledore's so-called worry based on himself meant. His desire for her not to get too involved in politics was understandable. As for honor, early fame is always one of the easiest ways to ruin a person, so Professor Dumbledore's reminder was not unreasonable. Professor, thank you for your reminder. Harley gently brushed the hair in front of her ears behind them. I understand what you mean, and I will pay attention to these things. Upon hearing this, Professor Dumbledore said no more. After all, Harley was so outstanding, and he believed that with Harley's wisdom, she could grasp these points. Professor, so you called me just to tell me this. Having spent more time with Professor Dumbledore, Harley was more relaxed. She leaned back in her chair, raised her hands high, and stretched. Fawkes, seeing Harley's raised hands, suddenly flew down from the perch and plunged into Harley's arms. When Harley reached out to stroke his feathers, Fawkes happily rubbed his head against Harley's fingers. Harley continued to caress the bird in her arms while looking at Professor Dumbledore. It seems Fawkes really likes you. Professor Dumbledore smiled, watching his betrayed pet, completely unfazed by him fawning over someone else in his presence. Isn't that obvious? Harley thought to herself. The demoness of Onaging's innate ability to maximize first impressions wasn't just for show. Moreover, according to information Hagrid inadvertently revealed, Fawkes had just been reborn, so his magic resistance during this period wouldn't be very high. Plus, whenever she occasionally encountered Fawkes at Hagrid's, she would always feed him something good, so the relationship between the two was very good. Quote. Alright, let's get back to the main topic. The primary reason I called you tonight is to understand your conversation with Tom and your impression of him. Professor, is there a problem with that? Harley tilted her head slightly to the side, while twirling a long tail feather of Fawkes with her fingers. Of course there's a problem. Dumbledore gently waved his wand, and the diary flew out of the cabinet, enveloped in a spherical, golden film. Harley looked closely and suddenly realized that it seemed to be phoenix fire, shimmering with alchemical runes. As an aside, the curse on the outer layer of the diary is truly exquisite. I almost suffered a mishap inadvertently. Dumbledore mentioned casually, then refocused his attention on the diary. After obtaining this diary, one of my conjectures was confirmed, and at the same time, a new conjecture arose. What is it, please? Harley asked with interest. Dumbledore hesitated for a moment, not answering immediately, but instead asked Harley a question. Harley, I want you to look into my eyes and answer me, do you desire immortality? Why would I desire it? I am the demoness of Onaging, I have already achieved that goal. So, I certainly don't desire it, because I don't desire immortality since I already have it. As for whether you desire it, that's none of my business. This thought flashed through Harley's mind, but Harley chose to express only a small part of her thoughts. Professor, I do not desire immortality. Professor Dumbledore gazed into Harley's emerald eyes, then let out a soft sigh. Harley, I believe you spoke the truth. The old man's voice sounded somewhat weary. Even Fawkes heard it, flying out of Harley's arms and landing on Professor Dumbledore's shoulder, gently rubbing his head against his master. Do you know, Harley? I've always been very worried about you. From the first time we met, you showed an exceptional talent for the dark arts. The black flame you used was filled with curses and an evil aura. I made some conjectures about this, and these were all based on a particularly evil dark arts spell that Tom cast. So I felt fear, afraid that a talented child like you would go down the wrong path, like Tom or someone else. But in the past 2 years, you have never shown the same tendencies as them. Instead, you were unmoved by the Philosopher's Stone, and you didn't flinch when facing the Basilisk and young Tom. I think that's the difference between you all. You are Gryffindor, and they are Slytherin or. In any case, Harley, I truly feel very relieved. Chapter 129 Horcrux. What a rubbish magic. Harley was momentarily puzzled by the old man's words, but still subconsciously replied, Thank you for your compliment, Professor Dumbledore. You shouldn't thank me, you should thank yourself. Now, I'm going to introduce you to a type of magic. Dumbledore's tone was very complex, his face showing a mix of recollection and regret. He gently waved his hand, and the golden flames on the diary slowly faded, finally disappearing. However, there was nothing unusual about the diary, as if it were just an ordinary, innocent, pitiful, and harmless diary. Horcruxes, an extremely evil dark arts. Dumbledore's gaze was very solemn, but he was not observing the diary, but the expression on Harley's face. This magic allows a part of a person's soul to be hidden in an object. As long as this object is not destroyed, even if the creator's body is damaged or destroyed, the creator will not die. Because a part of his soul remains undamaged in the world. Furthermore, after the original body disappears, both the main body and the soul in the Horcrux may absorb external magic and life force to revive. Of course, Horcruxes can also have the effect of granting immortality. If the main body is too old, it can also maintain life by relying on the soul in the Horcrux. After all, the time of that fragmented soul is essentially fixed, so the main body cannot die. Even if the soul and body are decayed to the extreme, they cannot die. Of course, to successfully create a Horcrux, one needs to kill a person. Only by maliciously murdering an innocent life and using a special spell can one's soul be split. Then, other special spells must be used to permanently preserve the fragmented soul in the Horcrux's vessel. Professor Dumbledore stopped his description, observing Harley's expression. But Harley was expressionless. After all that, is that it? What kind of trash magic? Splitting the soul itself is the most dangerous act, and extraordinary individuals of the death pathway have the most say in this. Harley remembered that, according to the records in the Demoness sect, Death once arranged for his subordinates to research soul splitting. However, most of the subjects lost control, and the rest experienced varying degrees of problems, and were basically unable to advance further. Therefore, Harley always remembered this information: never split your soul. Even without the requirement of splitting the soul, isn't this magic still very low tier? A witch pathway sequence 7 already has the primordial cocoon, allowing them to revive on the spot if they are beaten to the brink of death. And at the demoness of Unaging level, even if they are reduced to ashes, they can revive at a preset resurrection location. Most other pathways also have similar abilities, and pathways that cannot revive, such as barbarians like warriors and sailors, wouldn't even dare to join the conversation. As for relying on Horcruxes for immortality, living in the world with an aging body, unable to do anything, Harley would rather die a quick death. Besides, a soul fixed in an object won't decay, but will the object not decay? Unless particularly precious, inherently eternal magical items or wondrous items are used, otherwise, when the object decays, the soul fragments within it will probably dissipate directly into the heavens and earth. So what kind of trash magic is this Horcrux? The one who invented this magic is definitely a scoundrel out to trick people. Harley, what are your thoughts on this magic? Dumbledore's gaze was like an eagle's, fixed intently on Harley's eyes. I think this magic is really very ordinary. To put it nicely, it's a magic that looks profound but is actually very impractical. To put it bluntly, this magic is simply trash. Harley spread her hands. In terms of resurrection and self-preservation, I feel it's not as useful as the magic mirror doppelganger I was born with. And in terms of immortality, what's the difference between living in an aging body and being dead? I feel that learning alchemy from Mr. Nicholas and refining the Philosopher's Stone myself is more reliable than this. This time, it was Dumbledore's turn to be taken aback. It was the first time he had heard someone evaluate a Horcrux in this way. Other magic masters who understood this magic, regardless of whether they liked it or not, all rated it very highly. Almost everyone considered it one of the most evil dark arts in history, and believed that the villain who created this magic, the Dark Wizard Harpo, was a genius. Harley's statement, well, he had never heard of it. Of course, Dumbledore was happy to hear such a statement. I'm glad you think so. Despite his myriad thoughts, Professor Dumbledore remained unperturbed, his expression calm. Indeed, this magic should not exist. However, I regret to inform you that Tom's view is not quite consistent with yours. Or rather, you two are diametrically opposed. He probably admires this magic very much. It is precisely because he possesses Horcruxes that he has been able to cling to life. And I suspect he has created multiple Horcruxes, and I even have some evidence for this. Harley pondered for 2 minutes before thoughtfully saying, Professor, are you suggesting the diary is a Horcrux? He made multiple Horcruxes, what else is there? Could it be that you've recalled another clue about a Horcrux? That's right, the diary is a Horcrux. Professor Dumbledore held the diary in his hand, and golden red phoenix flames had appeared on his hand at some point. The flames steadily enveloped the diary, but did not harm it in the slightest. According to your account, he first enticed Ginny Weasley, then many other students, and absorbed life force and magic. Furthermore, he displayed his own thoughts and, to some extent, controlled Lockhart. Coupled with the extremely evil dark arts present within it, which can only be detected through in-depth examination, this is a Horcrux. At this point, Dumbledore shook his head, sighing for his unpromising student. What about the other Horcrux? Harley propped her chin, looking expectant. Professor Dumbledore's expression suddenly became a little complex. After a few seconds of pause, he spoke. As for the other Horcrux, I think you can probably guess it too. After all, you personally mentioned it when we first met. Me? Harley raised an eyebrow. That's right, it's you. At this point, Professor Dumbledore's tone lightened slightly. According to your description, the original owner of that soul fragment should be dear Tom. I think he was probably preparing to use your death to create his last Horcrux. However, by a strange twist of fate, he used the moment of his body's death to split his soul and lodge it within you, turning you into a Horcrux. But you were very lucky, probably when you were 11 years old and a surge of magic occurred. So that piece of soul shattered on its own, granting you these talents inclined towards dark arts. It is based on this information, as well as his daring to entrust such a precious Horcrux to his subordinate, the fence-sitter Lucius Malfoy, to be used as a weapon to open the Chamber of Secrets, that I suspect he very likely created multiple Horcruxes. Now the only question is how many he created. That really is. I don't know whether it's fortunate or unfortunate. Harley replied dryly. Chapter 130, Repaying a Favor, the Witch's Virtue. Harley was now very glad that Professor Dumbledore had imagined everything himself. One lie requires countless other lies to cover it up, but Professor Dumbledore's excellent imagination meant Harley didn't have to think of any more excuses. At the same time, Harley was also calculating in her heart, since Senior Riddle had helped her so much, saving her from losing control multiple times, and was so concerned about her in this second year, she naturally couldn't treat him poorly. Harley considered herself a good person, and good people should possess good virtues. Returning kindness for kindness has always been a good virtue for a witch, hasn't it? Harley was already thinking about how to utilize the soul fragment in the heavily sealed box at the bottom of her trunk once she returned. Since that soul fragment was connected to Lord Voldemort, once she returned to demigod status, she would definitely have to thoroughly process Senior Riddle. She just wondered, after enduring so much madness and loss of control, would that soul fragment and Lord Voldemort's other soul fragments still be able to connect? But now that she thought about it, in her first year, she used the madness and curses from that soul fragment to harm Professor Quirrell and Lord Voldemort in reverse. The ritual at the time had been exceptionally smooth, and she wondered if it was because this soul fragment originally belonged to Lord Voldemort. Approaching it from this angle, perhaps the probability of success would be greater. Thinking of this, Harley's plan had a general direction. Alright, the most important matter has been discussed. As for Tom's Horcrux, let this old man worry about it. Professor Dumbledore seemed to relax, as if a burden had been lifted from his mind. The troubles of this period are finally completely over. I can relax a little now. Saying this, Professor Dumbledore waved his hand, and a jar of sweets floated out from a cabinet. The sharp-eyed Harley recognized the label, and the corner of her mouth twitched involuntarily. The rumors were indeed true. Headmaster Dumbledore's taste was very peculiar. He actually liked cockroach clusters. It's well known that these sweets, which look like cockroaches, move like cockroaches, and burst like cockroaches when you bite into them, really cause a lot of psychological pressure to eat. Only a ruthless person like Professor Dumbledore would dare to taste them. She just wondered if, should a real cockroach crawl in, he would be able to distinguish it before taking a bite. Care for a few. Headmaster Dumbledore pinched out a few candy cockroaches that were desperately struggling from the jar. Harley subtly leaned back, politely declining, "Professor, I just came from the kitchens not long ago, and I'm a bit full." "Well, it seems you'll miss out on this delicacy." Professor Dumbledore sighed, bringing the sweets to his mouth. Fawkes, who had been rubbing his bird head against Dumbledore's cheek, saw the cockroaches approaching him, constantly waving their 6 slender legs, and instantly, the entire bird was not well. He let out a cry, angrily nudging Dumbledore's head. "Oh, Fawkes, are you trying to snatch this cockroach from me? Have you finally decided to try this delicacy?" Dumbledore said with a smile, seemingly not understanding Fawkes' meaning, or perhaps pretending not to. Fawkes' feathers immediately bristled, the ones on his tail standing on end. He shot into the sky and then darted back into Harley's arms, turning his head to squawk angrily at Dumbledore. What a joke. A noble phoenix truly couldn't stand such a thing. He only ate magical herbs and drank the pure water from the deepest part of the Forbidden Forest. Cockroach clusters, never in this lifetime. Absolutely not. Professor Dumbledore chewed on the cockroach clusters, looking at Harley. "Child, is there anything else you wish to know? For instance, about the punishment for the House of Malfoy. After all, they did quite a few bad things this time, and offended some people." "No need, Professor," Harley said expressionlessly. "I want to go back and sleep now. Also, the way you chew cockroach clusters is truly impressive." Professor Dumbledore's mouth twitched, but he didn't reply. "It's getting late. If you have nothing else, I'll head back now." Harley stood up. As she turned to leave, Professor Dumbledore seemed to remember something, and his voice suddenly rang out. "Oh, that's right. Regarding the basilisk materials, the school has already processed them for you and stored them with Professor Snape. If you need them, you can apply directly to Professor Snape. The school will not obstruct you." "Thank you, Headmaster Dumbledore." Harley pulled open the door to the headmaster's office. On her way back to the dormitory, Harley did not immediately return to the common room but took a turn, heading to the room of requirement. From the conversation between Scrimgeour and Professor Dumbledore today, she learned that the principal had the right to monitor the entire school. However, Harley guessed that Professor Dumbledore would not monitor at least 3 places: student dormitories, restrooms, and the room of requirement. If he monitored the first 2, Professor Dumbledore would be a complete pervert. And if Professor Dumbledore monitored the room of requirement, he would surely discover many of Harley's magical researches. A large part of these researches involved dark arts and curse rituals of a witch, and given his attitude today, Professor Dumbledore would not possibly stand by. So Harley could boldly infer that Professor Dumbledore could not observe the room of requirement. It was Hogwarts, lawless land. Entering the room that only she could enter, Harley lay down on the brand new bed and softly called out, "Dobby." With a pop, the house elf appeared at the head of the bed. "Great Harley Potter. Dobby comes at your summons and is always at your service. No need to be so respectful, I've never considered you a slave, but rather my friend." Harley sat up, saying softly. Dobby's eyes immediately welled up with tears, and he soon began to cry. Harley didn't stop him, allowing the house elf to vent his emotions. 5 minutes later, Dobby stopped crying and said loudly with gratitude, "Great Harley Potter, is there anything you need Dobby's help with? I want to know what changes occurred within the House of Malfoy today. I assume you followed my instructions and deliberately listened to the conversations of House of Malfoy members." Harley said calmly. "Yes, Harley Potter." Dobby bowed again. Tonight at dinner, Lucius Malfoy was furious. According to what Dobby heard, the House of Malfoy seemed to have been targeted within the Ministry of Magic. Lucius Malfoy said that the Higgs family seemed to want to completely eradicate them, or at least make them lose some important positions, and had contacted many pure blood families. Lucius Malfoy was planning to donate a sum of money to Cornelius Fudge to seek help. However, according to him, Draco Malfoy went too far this time, petrifying the Higgs family heir with a dark arts item, violating the unwritten rules between pure blood families. Although he attributed this act to the control of the Slytherin heir, and it was very likely he received help from others, he would still have to pay a considerable price. At this point, Dobby lowered his head and bowed deeply. Dobby did not detect any more news. Harley nodded. "You may go back for now, I will call you if I need you." "All right." Dobby will always answer the call of the great Harley Potter. When Dobby disappeared in the room of requirement, a smile played on Harley's lips. It seems the House of Malfoy has run into quite a bit of trouble. Harley lay on the bed, her wand spinning deftly between her fingers. Although Malfoy threw the Horcrux into Hogwarts, causing quite a bit of trouble, it also allowed me to acquire a large amount of materials. How should I repay them? Returning kindness for kindness, that is a witch's virtue after all. Chapter 131 Harley's popularity is soaring. Harley temporarily couldn't think of how to trouble the House of Malfoy, so she put this grudge aside for now. Anyway, their house elf, Dobby, was already in her hands, and ostensibly still belonged to the House of Malfoy. With this ticking time bomb, as long as she had an idea, she could give the House of Malfoy a huge surprise at any time. In the following days, the prevailing sentiment in the wizarding world quickly changed. The Ministry of Magic seemed to be trying to erase the negative impact of the previous period, so it spared no expense, vigorously promoting Harley. They conducted an exclusive interview with Harley and took a photograph of Harley standing in front of the basilisk's corpse. At the time, Harley had her hair tied in a single ponytail, light makeup on her face, a black pointed wizard hat on her head, a black cinched slimming robe, and height-increasing insoles in her shoes. Harley held her wand in her right hand, her other hand on her hip, standing atop the basilisk's head with a calm expression, exuding a heroic and spirited demeanor. As soon as this photo was released, combined with the writing of professional ghostwriters, Harley instantly became a sensation in the wizarding world, her popularity rivaling Lockhart's. However, Minister Fudge had little presence in these articles. Although during their conversation, Minister Fudge seemed prepared to take some credit for himself. But in reality, the newspaper articles still attributed most of the credit to Harley, praised the Aurors, and only briefly mentioned Minister Fudge's overall command and coordination. As for the specific reason, Harley recalled that Minister Fudge's book, From Prefect to Minister, mentioned that before becoming Minister for Magic, he was the deputy head of the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes. And according to information unintentionally revealed by Ron and Susan, whose elders worked at the Ministry of Magic, the Minister for Magic could basically only be the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. So Harley deduced that Minister Fudge might not be particularly well regarded within the Ministry of Magic, at least not by the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and its subordinate Auror headquarters. After all, they were not of the same faction. In fact, Minister Fudge had taken a position that should have belonged to their faction. Even now, Minister Fudge's direct combat forces are still members of the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes. And when the Great Hall was being cleaned up, the appreciation expressed by Scrimgeour, the head of the Auror headquarters, for Harley was genuine. Furthermore, as a violent organization, Aurors must also highly respect capable and strong individuals. The Aurors themselves were not fools, they clearly knew what role the Minister for Magic had actually played. So Minister Fudge couldn't fool them at all. Minister Fudge probably considered these points, so he simply did a favor, not snatching Harley's credit, and took the opportunity to promote the Aurors. After all, a Minister for Magic can promote himself whenever he wants. There's no need to deepen the Aurors' dislike of him over such a small matter. In addition to promoting Harley, Professor Lockhart was also used as a whipping boy. The Daily Prophet has always liked to praise one while disparaging another when promoting someone, so Professor Lockhart found no peace even after his death. He was labeled a dark wizard, and all those malicious incidents of stealing other people's memories were exposed. Initially, many of Professor Lockhart's fervent fans didn't believe it and bombarded the Ministry of Magic with letters, demanding the restoration of their idol's reputation. But when several authorities within the Ministry of Magic exposed Professor Lockhart's theft of others' memories and his rewriting of stories to make himself the protagonist, the sentiment instantly shifted. Wizards began to curse Professor Lockhart, and many female fans burst into tears, turning instead to idolize Harley, who had exposed Professor Lockhart's true nature. However, Harley didn't have time to deal with these fervent fans. In fact, Harley merely glanced at most of the letters she received before throwing them into the trash. In these few days, Harley had more important things to do. She was systematically executing her plan. Communicating with Professor Lockhart's spirit was high on Harley's agenda. According to Dobby, who overheard the Malfoy couple's conversation, Professor Lockhart's family had only him left, with no eligible heir for the contract. Therefore, according to regulations, anyone holding the corresponding key could enter the vault. Consequently, the Aurors searched Professor Lockhart's vault, but it only contained the current month's royalties. According to the goblins, Professor Lockhart withdrew his royalties every month and never left them in the vault. However, the Aurors also searched Professor Lockhart's office. It was spotless, with no legal items like galleons or evidence of illegal activities. Even the so-called evidence displayed by the Ministry of Magic's authorities in the newspaper was fabricated using magic. Clearly, Professor Lockhart was always ready to flee and did not trust any official institutions. This also indicated that Professor Lockhart must have a hidden fortune, as he was genuinely wealthy. As a wild, extraordinary individual with poverty and frugality etched into her bones, Harley naturally wouldn't let go of a large sum of innocent galleons. So communicating with Professor Lockhart's spirit was placed very high on her priority list. This was not an easy task, because although Professor Lockhart's soul was utterly defenseless, its strength was quite high. Moreover, a witch herself is not skilled in spiritual communication, which meant Harley might not be able to obtain all the important information during the process. For this, Harley drew up a detailed plan and began preparing to collect various ritual materials targeting souls. Besides planning to communicate with Professor Lockhart's spirit, Harley also spent a lot of time managing her relationships with classmates. Although she had temporarily appeased Hermione, after Harley recounted the entire Chamber of Secrets incident to Hermione, including the existence of Senior Riddle, Hermione still sulked for a while over Harley's solo adventuring. Furthermore, during this period, wherever Harley went, she attracted attention. Even when she went to the library to read, the area would be crowded with girls, and Harley did not stop these behaviors. This also made Hermione often give Harley a cold shoulder. Harley was vexed by this but had no better solution, so she could only let it be. However, these were minor issues compared to the Chamber of Secrets. Once the Chamber of Secrets incident was resolved, the castle returned to peace and tranquility. And the arrival of final exams meant that students had no time to daydream or crowd around Harley, but quickly resumed their studies. Harley was glad the crowds dispersed, so she had no objections to the final exams. But other students didn't think so, as many hadn't studied much due to the terrifying atmosphere this semester. Therefore, there were complaints throughout the castle, especially from those students who had been petrified. Just recently, Professor Sprout's mandrakes had matured. Professor Snape prepared the potion in just one night, so easily that he even allowed Harley to watch and assist him. The students came back to life that very night, and after just one night in bed, the stiffness in their muscles completely disappeared. But they wished they hadn't woken up, wished they had remained petrified for another 2 months. Because these poor little wizards, one blink of an eye, and the final exams were upon them. What a tragedy. If the professor hadn't given them a lifeline, allowing them to retake the exams at the start of next term, these unlucky children would have had to consider repeating the year. Chapter 132 The Capable Lucius. Harley, tonight we'll continue studying the potions that might appear in the competition. Even though only a short month remained until the final exams, Professor Snape hadn't ended Harley's detention, nor had Harley actively requested its cessation. After all, it was just a mere final exam. Was there any difficulty? During this period, Harley had been diligently studying various potions frequently featured as competition topics in the Potions Championship. According to past practice, the potions in the first event of the championship were usually drawn from a range provided by the organizers. This was to account for the fact that each magic school used different textbooks. Without a specified scope for the competition topics, unfair situations could easily arise. Judging by Hogwarts' teaching standards, the potions provided by the organizers were mostly high-difficulty remedies that Hogwarts students only learned in their 6th or 7th year, such as the Elixir of Euphoria and the Draft of Living Death. However, very few students attended Hogwarts' Advanced Potions class each year, as not many could meet Professor Snape's requirements. As for those who could maintain excellent grades after entering the advanced class, there hadn't been a single one in recent years. This illustrates the high difficulty in brewing these potions. But Harley found them effortless to learn, even remarkably adept at potion making. After a full night of work, Professor Snape looked at the draft of living death Harley had brewed, nodding in satisfaction, and commented on every detail. Quote, "Very good, your knife work is excellent, the soporiferous bean slices are very thin, allowing them to release the maximum amount of juice. Actually, I'd suggest you use the side of a silver dagger to press the soporiferous bean, it extracts juice more easily and is more beginner-friendly. However, this would prevent some of the juice from being fully extracted, leading to waste. Of course, you fully considered the possibility of uneven ingredient mixing, so after stirring 7 times counterclockwise, you chose to stir once clockwise. This effectively increases the contact between ingredients. Of course, if you control the force appropriately, consistently stirring counterclockwise is the most perfect method." Professor Snape's accomplishments in potions were impeccable, and he continuously improved upon the potions in textbooks. Of course, this isn't to say there were problems with the methods of the masters who compiled the textbooks. Rather, the potions masters, when designing the textbooks, forgot that students couldn't reach their level. They provided the optimal methods in the book but didn't consider that students couldn't achieve them. Professor Snape finally finished his critique. "At your current pace, you'll finish learning these potions in 1 more week at most. Then I will teach you my secret original potions, preparing you for the second round of the competition." "Thank you, Professor," Harley replied, as she bottled and sealed the potion, placing it on a shelf in the office. With Professor Snape's endorsement, these potions could fetch a good price. Of course, Harley wouldn't sell them herself. Instead, she asked Professor Snape to help her dispose of them. Professor Snape originally intended to give all the galleons from selling these potions to Harley. However, after Harley refused many times, Professor Snape no longer insisted and put all the galleons into a single small pouch. "Professor, I wish you pleasant dreams tonight." Harley looked into Professor Snape's eyes, smiled sweetly, and said a soft farewell before leaving the office. On her way back to the dormitory, Harley made a detour to the room of requirement before returning to her room. Dobby now sends Harley a letter every week, placing the collected intelligence directly into the room in the room of requirement that only Harley can enter. Fortunately, this room greatly respected the traditions of the wizarding world, recognizing Dobby as Harley's item, so Dobby could also enter without any hindrance. Harley lay on her bed in her pajamas, pulling a thick stack of letters from a small pocket by her bedside. This pocket was a gift from Professor Snape. After her last encounter with Lockhart, where she hadn't brought ritual materials for illusions, Harley had always wanted a magical item with storage capabilities. Initially, she didn't have much hope, as in the sequence pathway world, only a few pathways possessed such abilities, and the corresponding wondrous items were extremely difficult to find. But when Harley first went to see Professor Snape after killing the basilisk, Professor Snape pointed to 2 small pouches on the shelf. The precious materials from the basilisk that require special preservation, such as its venom, blood, and eyes, are all in the left pouch. The remaining materials, which the Ministry of Magic still needs for evidence, are temporarily in the right pouch as the entire basilisk corpse. Seeing Harley's slightly puzzled look, Professor Snape added 2 more sentences. "Both of these pouches have been enchanted with an undetectable extension charm, expanding the space inside many times over. That's why they can hold materials that are severely disproportionate to their own volume." After learning about such a good item, Harley asked Professor Snape to buy one for her and forcefully slipped the galleons into the professor's pocket. Now, Harley's pocket was already filled with various materials, such as the basilisk's large eyeballs, parts of its nerves, and 1/5 of its venom and blood. These were the essence of the basilisk, essential for murder and arson, and a favorite of Demoness of Affliction. Especially the basilisk's eyes, which had, to some extent, approached the level of mythical creatures, making them perfect for either creating sealed artifacts or as potion ingredients. Harley lay on her bed, studying the information Dobby had written for her, which included Dobby's latest findings on some secrets and assets of the House of Malfoy and political events within the Ministry of Magic. Interesting, Harley suddenly chuckled. Lucius Malfoy really is capable, he even won a battle against the odds. The parchment scroll Harley was reading clearly stated that Lucius had sighed to his wife, Narcissa, at dinner, that he had finally settled everything. According to Harley's analysis of the information, Lucius voluntarily relinquished the House of Malfoy's seat on the school board and compensated the other board members with 1,000 galleons each to make up for the losses caused by his initiative to remove Dumbledore as principal. Additionally, Lucius provided Fudge with 20,000 galleons in political aid and donated a large sum of charity money to several well-known institutions in the wizarding world, including St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries and the Anti-Dark Arts Alliance. Lucius even hosted a dinner at his manor with many members of the Wizengamot and patriarchs of pure blood family. After all this was done, the matter of Terence Higgs's attack became less important. It was Draco who, angered by Terence Higgs spreading unfavorable rumors about him, chose to purchase dark arts items and actively attack Teal Higgs. However, in the end, Lucius spun the incident to claim that Lockhart had controlled Draco, making him do all of it. As for Malfoy, he was an innocent good boy who had committed no wrong. As a result, the Higgs family not only failed to get compensation but also had to publicly apologize to the House of Malfoy in pure blood circles for tarnishing the House of Malfoy's reputation. According to Dobby, the patriarch of the Higgs family directly confronted Lucius, only to be thoroughly humiliated by him. Since the two families had already fallen out over family honor, Lucius naturally wouldn't miss an opportunity to kick them while they were down. This is politics. Harley sighed in her heart. It's a pity Dobby has other important uses for me. Otherwise, if I let him expose Lucius's act of planting a Horcrux in Hogwarts, Lucius would be finished. The Higgs family is truly unlucky. An Auror died, their sole heir was attacked, and in the end, they still had to apologize. After reading through the information, Harley sorted and organized it, then put it back into the pouch. Chapter 133, Night Exploration of the Secret Room. The final exams finally arrived. Considering that the Chamber of Secrets was opened and a series of attacks occurred this school year, students were very panicked, which definitely severely affected their learning efficiency. So, after discussion, the professors decided to lower the difficulty of the exam papers by 2 levels. After finishing the exam, Harley knew she would definitely be first in all subjects. She got full marks in every subject, how could anyone surpass her? But Hermione didn't think so. Even though she had reviewed 2 full rounds more than Harley, she still wanted to go over the answers with Harley after the exam. I think I got the 4th question of the Charms Theory exam wrong. I didn't spell freezing charm correctly, Hermione said, looking terrified, as if she had committed an unforgivable mistake. Harley could only reluctantly intervene again, subduing Hermione and making her sign an unequal treaty, demanding that Hermione no longer go over answers. Harley now had more important things to do, such as exploring Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets. One night before the exams, Harley finally gathered all the materials from Hagrid, Professor Snape, and the Forbidden Forest, among other sources, and performed a thorough spiritual communication with Professor Lockhart. Through this communication, Harley received a lot of important information. For example, a piece of information Harley was particularly concerned about, Professor Lockhart's hidden location for his galleons. It must be said, Professor Lockhart was still very cautious. He chose to hide most of his assets in a Muggle village. Professor Lockhart had purchased a property there and protected it with illusions. His assets were buried underground in the house. This Muggle village was far away in northern Europe, and with a small population, it was almost impossible for any wizard to go there, so Lockhart's assets could be said to be very safe. Harley sighed at Lockhart's meticulousness while pondering when to retrieve the money. After all, galleons are innocent, they would not be contaminated by Lockhart, and certainly should not be buried like this. These shiny little darlings should be in the hands of the right person, radiating their own brilliance. And Harley, this poor, incapable of earning money, lonely former wild extraordinary person, was that right person. She could only reluctantly help Professor Lockhart put them to good use. Besides the hiding place for the money, Professor Lockhart's mind also stored a lot of stolen knowledge. These were mostly Master Wizard's unique skills, such as a certain old man's original, humanoid restoration charm, a spell that could forcibly restore a werewolf to human form and sanity. Lockhart also knew the preciousness of this magical knowledge, but he was unwilling to learn it, only memorizing it in his mind. It was also thanks to Lockhart, as a Ravenclaw, having good memory and the aid of memory magic, that this magical knowledge was not lost. However, Harley put them aside to study during the summer vacation or next semester when she had time. Now the most important thing was to explore Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets. Harley had longed for this place for a long time. As Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets, Slytherin himself should have left some magical knowledge, right? In Senior Riddle, he could have a physical form, which was probably also due to a ritual performed in the Chamber of Secrets. Harley was very curious about this ritual. Even if none of these existed, part of Professor Lockhart's legacy was worth Harley's effort. According to the spiritual communication results, after obtaining the diary, Lockhart went to the Chamber of Secrets multiple times, treating it as a small stronghold. He didn't leave anything good in his office at Hogwarts. Presumably, he transferred his personal belongings to the Chamber of Secrets. After finishing the last History of Magic exam, that night, Harley packed all her equipment, ready to explore the Chamber of Secrets. Following Lockhart's memory, she arrived at the girls' lavatory on the second floor, where Myrtle resided. When she first learned that the Chamber of Secrets was here, Harley couldn't help but wonder what Gaunt, who rebuilt Hogwarts, was thinking. And how did dear Senior Riddle discover the exact location of the Chamber of Secrets? The more she thought about it, the more terrifying it became. The Dark Lord, who had terrified the wizarding world for so long, and the descendant of the Great Slytherin, were actually a bunch of perverts. Harley found the brass faucet in the sink that never ran water. A small snake was carved on its side. "Open," Harley hissed. The faucet emitted a dazzling white light and began to spin wildly. Then, the sink also moved, slowly disappearing from view, revealing a thick pipe large enough for a person to crawl into. "That's great, thanks to Lockhart for cleaning this place up." Harley looked at the pipe wall, which didn't even have dust, and couldn't help but thank Professor Lockhart for 2 seconds. Spider silk spread, filling the lavatory with dense cobwebs. After ensuring the path was clear, Harley let the spider silk wrap around her waist and guided herself down. Lumos. Upon landing, Harley immediately used magic. Although she had night vision, light made her feel more at ease. Thanks to Harley's superb magical skill, the dark tunnel became brightly lit, like daytime. Harley walked forward and finally arrived in front of a wall. 2 intertwined snakes were carved on the wall, with large emeralds embedded in their eyes. After cautiously casting several layers of defense spells on herself, Harley spoke again, "Open." The stone wall split in the middle, revealing the passage within. Harley reluctantly glanced at the eyes of the 2 snakes. Such large, high-quality emeralds were excellent materials. Shaking her head, Harley continued to walk forward. Behind the wall was a long, dimly lit room. Many stone pillars carved with coiling, intertwined serpents supported the ceiling. Although the mysterious green mist filling the room obstructed the spread of magical light, Harley, with her dark vision, could still clearly see the end of the room. At the end of the room was a statue, the statue of Slytherin. In front of the statue was a huge cauldron, filled with dried potion. Around the cauldron were many materials, including the dried corpses of the 12 missing dwarves. The alchemical runes carved on the cauldron were dim, but they still showed the extraordinary nature of the ritual. What a pity, many materials can no longer be used. Harley shook her head, feeling a little pained. She pulled out materials from her pocket and began to set up a ritual, preparing to preserve this scene completely. With Harley's current magical knowledge, there were still many things in this ritual that Harley couldn't understand. After preserving the ritual, Harley inspected the Chamber of Secrets. Professor Lockhart had placed his important personal belongings behind a pillar, in 2 pockets enchanted with an undetectable extension charm. Harley quickly confirmed there was no magic on them, then briefly rummaged through the 2 pockets, finding many galleons, some potion ingredients, and notes. The handwriting on the notes was not Lockhart's. It seemed he had acquired them incidentally while stealing memories, so they were all thrown into the bag. Harley didn't examine the notes carefully before putting them back in the pocket, as there was no rush. Only one last place left to explore. After confirming there were no other good things in the Chamber of Secrets, Harley looked at Slytherin's statue. "Speak to me, Slytherin, the greatest of the 4 founders of Hogwarts." Chapter 134 The deepest part of the secret chamber. The giant stone face of Slytherin came to life, its mouth opening wider and wider, forming a huge black void. According to Lockhart's memories, when Lord Voldemort summoned the basilisk, it always emerged from here. Although this likely connected to the sewers, Harley suspected there might be another chamber of secrets within. After all, it made no sense for Slytherin to leave no written legacy for his heir, only a 1,000-year-old basilisk. Looking at the opening, Harley didn't hesitate, her legs tensing slightly. She used the serpent-shaped carvings on the stone pillars next to the statue and the protrusions on the Slytherin statue itself to move quickly, finally leaping to the opening. As soon as she reached the opening, a strange odor assailed her, and the ground of the passage was covered in indescribable, nauseating substances. In that instant, Harley even doubted her own conjecture. After all, it was hard for anyone to imagine that the noble Slytherin would build another chamber of secrets in such a disgusting place. But having come this far, Harley decided to continue onward. She lit up the passage with her wand, enveloped herself in black flames, and hurried forward. The further she went, the stronger the strange odor became, and faint sounds of water could be heard from the end of the passage. Damn it, it seems I was wrong, and suffered for so long for nothing. Harley grumbled, about to turn back, when her gaze swept across the wall to her side. Harley's movements instantly stopped. She saw a small serpent-shaped mark at that spot. There really was a chamber of secrets specifically left with written information. Harley was first surprised, then grew more vigilant, her right hand still holding her wand, and her left hand already drawing the dagger she had brought from the family vault. According to Lockhart's memories, Senior Riddle had never mentioned this place. Harley also didn't believe that the self-important Lord Voldemort would explore this foul-smelling passage. Moreover, he wouldn't believe that Slytherin would build another chamber of secrets here. So, if Harley wasn't mistaken, this place had probably never been explored, and she didn't know what traps it might hold. Open. The small snake glowed green, and then a small opening appeared in the wall. Harley maintained her cautious approach, first throwing a small mirror inside. After confirming there was no danger through her spiritual vision, she entered herself. This was a small room, empty except for some text carved into the walls. Judging by the thick layer of dust on the ground, no one had been here for nearly 1,000 years. Sure enough, Lord Voldemort hasn't been here. Harley mused, picking up the mirror and dusting it off. Cold air surged from Harley's body, quickly freezing the dust on the ground, creating a foothold for herself. Without much thought, Harley went directly to the wall with the carvings. The wall was covered in dense text, information left by Slytherin in Parseltongue. My descendant, I am glad you can see this. By the time you read this, I am likely dead, or not far from it. I originally didn't want these words to remain, fearing you would follow the ancient texts and walk the same path as I. But I also didn't want to leave nothing at all, so I built this chamber of secrets within a chamber of secrets. The reason for my impending death is that the path ahead, which could have been continued, has been severed. And the path I once walked is also disappearing, even the ground beneath my feet is collapsing. Godric, Rowena, and Helga are also experiencing the same. So we can only choose to embark on another path, a path almost certain to lead to death. But we have no choice. I have left some precious, but not particularly dangerous, magical knowledge in the basilisk's mind. I hope you can make good use of it. Upon reading this, Harley understood why no one had come here. The basilisk's mind contained Slytherin's knowledge, and Lord Voldemort knew this when he discovered the Chamber of Secrets. He probably thought that was the entire legacy, and wouldn't have imagined that deep within the passage behind the statue, there was another hidden Chamber of Secrets with a small amount of information. Furthermore, no one would believe that Slytherin, who always maintained his nobility, would build a Chamber of Secrets within a Chamber of Secrets here, so he never even set foot in it. As for Gaunt, according to the books, he merely optimized the existing pipeline system of the castle and modified the entrance to Slytherin's outermost Chamber of Secrets, allowing the basilisk to move within the walls. The pipes outside this room already existed at that time, allowing the basilisk to go outside and hunt. So, it makes sense that this basilisk, despite living for over 1,000 years, didn't have much of a brain. Harley caressed the words on the wall. Perhaps Senior Riddle chose to destroy the basilisk's brain to prevent the magic from leaking out. However, thanks to Senior Riddle, if it weren't for his selfish actions, I wouldn't have discovered this Chamber of Secrets. Slytherin's words concealed a lot of information, which could also be linked to what Nicholas told Harley last summer and the information from the ancient ghost at the Death Day party. Harley silently noted down this information, then left the room. The Chamber of Secrets was sealed again by Harley. To avoid disturbing the ritual site, Harley took nothing except Lockhart's 2 pockets. In the room of requirement, Harley emptied everything from the bags. One bag contained a little over half a bag of galleons, probably thousands of them, along with some pearls and a considerable number of gemstones. The other bag, besides notes, also contained some potion ingredients. Most of these potion ingredients were related to healing and flesh-based potions, which Harley guessed Lockhart had collected additionally while helping Lord Voldemort gather materials. But what surprised Harley the most was a coiled piece of basilisk skin at the very bottom of the pocket. Although the snakeskin had been carefully rolled up, it still took up most of the pocket. The color of the snakeskin was very vibrant, clearly shed not long ago. This is great. Harley's face lit up with joy, as the skin on that basilisk had been torn to shreds by her ice spear. And now, this complete skin was clearly more valuable to Harley. After sorting her gains, Harley took a shower and, instead of returning to her dormitory, chose to sleep right there. The term ended, and the results were out. Harley, without a doubt, came in first. The Great Hall was still adorned in vibrant red, as Harley had crushed Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw in the latter two Quidditch matches, her Nimbus 2000 easily tearing through their defenses. Although Katie missed the golden snitch against Cho Chang of Ravenclaw, it didn't stop Harley from scoring 17 goals in a single match. With the extra points from the Quidditch matches, plus the points Harley earned from her Special Contribution Award, Gryffindor was undeniably in first place. 8 consecutive championships. We should have had 8 consecutive championships. The Slytherins were indignant, but they had to admit that Harley had earned these points fair and square, and the professors hadn't shown any favoritism. However, Professor Snape wasn't particularly unhappy, as he knew he bore some of the responsibility. In any case, it was only for these 7 years. Once the 7-year period passed, with Professor Snape's bonus, the House Cup champion would still be theirs. Besides, after Lockhart's death, Professor Snape once again took on his coveted role as defense against the dark arts professor, so he had no reason to be dissatisfied. Just before boarding the train to leave Hogwarts, Professor Snape sought Harley out again. Approximately 1 week after you return to the Dursleys' house, come to the Leaky Cauldron. I will take you to participate in the potion championship then. Professor, what is our planned route? Harley asked. Dumbledore and old Professor Horace will accompany us. The Ministry of Magic will specially approve a portkey to France. The route after that, you'll have to ask Dumbledore. Professor Snape said softly, when you go back, review the original potions I taught you in the last few weeks. Don't feel pressured, with your skill level, it won't be a problem. After bidding farewell to Professor Snape, Harley boarded the train home. On the way, the girls instantly mourned when they heard that Harley might not be able to provide answers this holiday. Hermione, however, seemed quite pleased. They rely on you too much. Hermione whispered to Harley as they got off the train, goodbye, let's keep in touch if we have a chance this summer. Goodbye. Harley chuckled, saying goodbye to Hermione, then walked towards Uncle Vernon, who looked as if he were facing a formidable enemy. End of Volume 2 Summary. Volume 2 has been completed. The author feels that it wasn't written particularly well, because the author wanted to portray a different Lockhart, as constantly seeing the incompetent clown Lockhart felt aesthetically tiresome. However, the effect was clearly not ideal. Many plot points I wanted to set up were left unaddressed, making it seem particularly chaotic and a bit anticlimactic, which led to a drop in subscriptions. So, the author has become the clown himself, boo-hoo-hoo. Let me talk about my thought process. I've always felt that while Lockhart might not be a top-tier wizard, he wouldn't be particularly weak either, at least he should be above average. After all, he stole so many stories, he must have successfully ambushed quite a few wizards. And even if these people were owl specialists who only knew how to fight specific dark creatures, those were still dark creatures, dangerous existences. So, they shouldn't lack basic vigilance, especially according to the scattered mentions in the original work. Some of them lived far from Wizarding World, residing alone for extended periods. Such wizards would definitely not lack vigilance. So, is Lockhart, who never failed so many times, weak? Perhaps he wasn't exceptionally strong, but he absolutely couldn't be called particularly weak. Also, his memory magic is definitely not bad. The original work only mentioned, obliviate, but please don't forget, some wizards saved an entire village. This indicates that more than one person witnessed what happened, and it would be very easy for others to gather evidence. Lockhart received the Order of Merlin Medal and was a member of the Anti-Dark Arts League, so both of these would definitely conduct simple investigations. Lockhart claimed he saved that village, surely the villagers must have some impression of him. Even if, for argument's sake, these people didn't investigate, what about the fanatical fans in the wizarding world who can take spontaneous trips anytime? What if they went to check it out? Therefore, through this reasoning, I added the setting that Lockhart is skilled in memory magic, allowing him to edit the memories of the villagers. And Lockhart's strength is not weak, but his performance in the original work was poor, so I chose to give him a specialty in illusion magic, which pairs well with memory magic. At the same time, I added the setting of a curse. He was under a curse, which made him even more exaggerated, knowing he couldn't handle the position of defense against the dark arts professor, yet insisting on taking it and refusing to resign. And the diary took advantage of this point, secretly modifying his memories while lifting the curse, amplifying his character flaws. After all, at 16, according to the plot of the 6th book, Lord Voldemort had already modified his uncle's memories, and ordinary detection methods couldn't find it, so his skill in memory magic should be quite strong. So, combined with Lockhart letting down his guard when the curse was lifted, Lord Voldemort slightly altering his memories and adding a bit of combat ability becomes reasonable. At the same time, Lord Voldemort amplified this arrogant emotion in him and made him unable to distinguish between illusion and reality. After all, the young Lord Voldemort was always a master at manipulating people's minds. It was only when he grew old and mad that he lost this ability to a certain extent, beginning to believe in the fear brought by death. Because of this arrogance, Lockhart dared to confront Aurors, professors, and all the students, publicly provoking them and using the spells Lord Voldemort taught him to kill an Auror. Coupled with him being slightly enhanced by Lord Voldemort, gaining part of the life force of those 12 deceased dwarves, he was able to fight Harley to a standstill initially, when she wasn't serious and hadn't used many of her abilities. Later, once Harley got serious, the arrogant Lockhart was killed. In short, it's frustrating. I feel the idea was good, but I didn't execute it well, so I hastily concluded this volume. The author will summarize later and try to avoid such problems. Volume 3 is about to begin, but thinking about Azkaban, it seems there's not much to write about, so I'll try to add more original content about the wizarding world, such as potion competitions and so on. Finally, thank you all for your support, and please send some monthly votes. Chapter 135, Harry with Slippery Shoulders. In the early morning, a ray of sunlight shone into a room with uncurtained windows, illuminating the large bed in the center of the room. The young girl on the bed turned over, shifting her body in a daze, finding a more comfortable position. During this process, the girl's slender calves unconsciously exerted a slight force, and the thin quilt covering her flew up, landing on Hedwig's cage. The little snowy owl, who had been staring at her owner with a look of resentment, was startled instantly, flapping her wings twice and letting out a dissatisfied cry. But she seemed to remember something, and obediently closed her mouth, becoming quiet again, only occasionally lowering her head to drink some water. Harley hummed softly, sitting up. The strap of her nightgown slipped slightly, revealing half of her flawless, smooth shoulder. Considering Harley's actual age, this could certainly be described as an old shoulder, incredibly smooth. Harley, still groggy, moved to get out of bed. She kept her eyes tightly closed, her small feet stepping directly onto the floor, then quickly recoiled, her tender, crystal-clear toes restlessly pressing against each other, and her arch slightly curled. After all, with the summer heat, Harley had covered the floor with a layer of ice before going to bed last night. And now, Harley, still half asleep, had forgotten about this, so her exposed little feet coming into direct contact with the ice naturally caused her a bit of discomfort. Thanks to this sudden chill, Harley's brain was forcibly activated, quickly entering a state of full wakefulness. After shaking her head, Harley first clapped her hands, turning the ice into magic, then gently massaged her jade-like feet with her soft, delicate hands. Tonight, I must remember not to cover the floor by the bed with ice, Harley mumbled, raising her left hand. Her index finger gently hooked, and the quilt covering the owl cage was pulled back by a spider silk. After tidying her clothes and quickly washing up, Harley didn't eat breakfast but went straight back upstairs. She plunged onto the bed, hugged the quilt, and rolled several times, feeling the softness of the silk, her face filled with a blissful expression. Silk quilts are so comfortable. They're fragrant and soft, only slightly less comfortable than Hermione. However, this time Harley didn't go back to sleep but picked up the letters by her bedside and began to read them carefully. As expected, it's someone wanting to help me check my homework again. Harley changed from lying down to crawling, placing a pillow under her neck to make herself more comfortable while lying on her stomach. Forget it, let them go find Hannah. Harley finally triumphed over the quilt goblin, climbed out of bed, and quickly replied to the letters. Harley had already finished all her summer homework, as the workload wasn't heavy, and several professors had even directly exempted her from homework. So, Harley, who had started working on her assignments right after the final exams, completed all her tasks on the third day after the holiday began and sent her homework to the meticulous Hannah. After finishing these tasks, Harley watched Hedwig fly away, then looked at the calendar. A full week of vacation had passed, and Harley calculated the time, realizing she would probably go to the Leaky Cauldron in the afternoon. After setting a time, Harley casually pulled out 2 rolls of parchment from her bag and began to read them carefully. The competition was about to begin, and Harley had been repeatedly memorizing these formulas recently. These rolls of parchment in her hand were all Professor Snape's proud works, results he obtained after hundreds of failures and consuming a large amount of Hogwarts's budget. Even for Harley, these potions had a certain level of difficulty. Until now, Harley was not confident that she could produce a perfect quality potion 100% of the time. Just as Harley was stuffing chocolate frogs into her mouth and studying the formulas, a knock suddenly sounded from downstairs. Harley didn't pay attention, initially thinking it was someone else visiting Dudley, but then her own room door was knocked upon. Aunt Petunia's voice rang out, "Harley, your potion class professor say. Snape is waiting for you." Severus, Snape, the first syllable is the same. "Got it, I'll be right down." Harley found a wizard robe, pulled it over her head, and quickly went downstairs. Downstairs, Professor Snape, wearing his familiar black robe, sat on a chair by the staircase. Upon seeing Harley, a faint smile appeared on his otherwise expressionless face, but it quickly vanished. "Hurry and pack your luggage." Dumbledore, that old man, suddenly arranged to go to the competition venue with the Beauxbatons people, so the departure time has been moved up. "We'll be using a portkey to go to France this afternoon, so I'm taking you to the Leaky Cauldron now." Harley nodded. "All right, Professor, please wait 2 minutes for me." Harley quickly packed all her luggage after returning to her room. Considering whether she would return or not, Harley packed all her books into a box. Anyway, she was traveling with 2 professors and 1 former professor. They couldn't possibly expect her, a weak girl with no strength, to carry the boxes, could they? Professors were allowed to openly use magic. When Harley dragged her suitcase downstairs, Professor Snape was still sitting in his original spot, and the Dursley family were still hiding in the kitchen. However, upon seeing Harley dragging a suitcase, seemingly about to go somewhere with Professor Snape, Aunt Petunia immediately rushed out of the kitchen and blocked the doorway. "Severus, where are you taking Harley? What are you going to do to her? Didn't you say earlier that you were just here to see Harley? You didn't tell me you were taking Lily's child out of this house. If you don't explain yourself clearly, I won't let you leave." Uncle Vernon and Dudley watched Aunt Petunia's unusual behavior in horror, and although they didn't know what was happening, they didn't dare to breathe loudly. Harley blinked, immediately realizing the situation. It was probably because Professor Snape was again a man of few words, only saying he was there to see her. However, Harley was still a bit surprised that Aunt Petunia was so worried about her. "Aunt Petunia," Harley explained softly, "the school has arranged for me to participate in an international magic competition, so I'll be away for a while, possibly not returning until school starts. And you don't need to worry too much, Headmaster Dumbledore will be traveling with us." Hearing Harley personally confirm that Dumbledore was also going, Aunt Petunia finally nodded and no longer obstructed them. The expression on her face returned to indifference, and she turned and walked into the kitchen. "Let's go, we'll apparate directly." Professor Snape seemed completely unaffected. He waved his wand, and several large boxes disappeared. "Dumbledore must have apparated with you before, so you should know what to do." Harley nodded, reaching out and firmly grasping Professor Snape's arm. However, a peculiar glint flashed in her eyes, as Aunt Petunia had directly called Professor Snape by his first name, Severus. She had said it so naturally that Harley wouldn't believe they hadn't known each other before. Coupled with Aunt Petunia mentioning her mother's name, Harley keenly sensed that there was a story here. Professor Snape had no idea Harley was thinking so much. He shuddered when Harley grabbed him, then immediately spun in place, using magic to conceal his loss of composure. The two instantly vanished into thin air. Chapter 136, Making Wizarding Britain Great Again. In the Leaky Cauldron, Professor Dumbledore was sipping violet sparkling water, with a freshly opened tin of cockroach clusters beside him. The candy cockroaches in the tin desperately tried to crawl out, but they were firmly blocked by an invisible barrier at the opening. Professor Slughorn, nearby, was reclining in a comfortable winged armchair, his feet resting on a large velvet cushion he had conjured, looking utterly content. Professor Slughorn held a small glass of grape juice in his left hand, while his other hand picked through a box of candied jackfruit, occasionally popping a piece into his mouth. "Oh, I must say, Ambrosius's skill is getting better and better," Professor Slughorn boasted to Dumbledore, chewing on a piece of candied jackfruit. "My best decision was introducing him to Cicerone Husky, which got him his first job. Even now, I still get these delicious candied jackfruit from Honeydukes at half price." "Yes, you certainly have good foresight, Horace." Dumbledore took a sip of sparkling water, a look of intoxication on his face, then said as if casually, "Especially since you're always willing to teach magic to gifted students." Cough, cough. Professor Slughorn coughed twice forcefully, suddenly very interested in his sugar-dusted fingers. At the same time, he asked as if by chance, why hasn't Severus brought Harley yet? I'm already eager to chat with that talented child again. Merlin, she's truly gifted, even more so than her mother. This year, her brilliant ideas have given me a lot of inspiration. If I were still at Hogwarts, I would definitely pull her into my club. Dumbledore smiled and nodded. Earlier, he had only mentioned it offhandedly. For such an important matter, he certainly couldn't inquire about it in public. The two didn't have to wait long. Soon, the door to a small room on the first floor of the Leaky Cauldron, designated for apparition, opened, and Professor Snape emerged with Harley. Severus, we're over here. Dumbledore raised his cup in a gesture. Hello, Professor, long time no see, Harley greeted Professor Slughorn after sitting down. Although Slughorn was no longer a professor, he still preferred to be called Professor. He always believed that choosing to become the potion class professor at Hogwarts was his best decision, as this compulsory subject allowed him to interact with a large number of outstanding students. Long time no see, Harley. Have a piece of candied jackfruit, it's a new product just sent from Honeydukes this morning. Professor Slughorn pointed to the beautifully packaged box beside him. The sugar dust on his fingers had disappeared at some point, and his feet were already off the velvet cushion. If I remember correctly, you'll be in your third year this semester, so you can go to Hogsmeade, right? When you do, be sure to visit Honeydukes, their delicious treats are not to be missed. Thank you for the recommendation, Professor, Harley said sweetly, carefully selecting a piece of candied fruit from the box, holding it with a handkerchief. Harley, this time you're representing Hogwarts in an international competition, so we need to follow official procedures. Dumbledore began to outline the itinerary after their conversation concluded. I've applied for a portkey at the Ministry of Magic, departing this afternoon, with our destination being the French Ministry of Magic. After a quick registration, we'll go directly to Beauxbaton's Academy of Magic. Madame Maxime will have a few beds reserved for us, and you might even meet some acquaintances. Mr. and Mrs. Nicholas Flamel will also be attending the competition, so they'll be at Beauxbaton's as well. Then tomorrow, we'll all take Beauxbaton's transportation to the specific competition venue. That's wonderful, I still miss Beauxbaton's foie gras, caviar, and French bouillabaisse. Slughorn took a sip of grape juice, shaking his head. Wine still paired better with candied jackfruit. Professor, will we just be waiting here until the afternoon? Harley asked. Not necessarily, you can go explore Diagon Alley, just be back before 2 in the afternoon. Your luggage is in the warehouse upstairs, and if you need to get some galleons, you can ask old Tom to help you. During the remaining time before departure, Harley did not go to Gringotts to withdraw money again. Thanks to Professor Lockhart's generosity, she even had gemstone materials, sparing Harley the torment of Gringotts' bumpy carts. After restocking some potions and parchment, Harley wrote letters to a few of her best friends, telling them she was going to France and to not contact her for a while. This time Harley didn't use Hedwig, but let her rest in her cage for a bit, sending a few public elves instead. Everyone else wished Harley a smooth journey, as they had already received the correct homework. Although there were some omissions, the professor had excused Harley from her homework in front of everyone, so they couldn't say much. Hermione expressed her regret at not being able to attend the competition in person. Although the Grangers were also taking her on a trip to France, their destinations were the Eiffel Tower and Notre Dame. Clearly, the Magical School Potion Championship venue was not part of their travel plans, nor could it possibly appear on them. However, she mentioned in her reply that her family planned to stay from mid-July until the end of August. If Harley hadn't left Paris by then, the Grangers could take Harley to see the sights of the Muggle world. At 2 in the afternoon, the 4 of them apparated directly to the Ministry of Magic. Professor Dumbledore had somehow acquired a bag enchanted with an undetectable extension charm, and the bag's capacity was enormous. Harley watched as the bag effortlessly held everyone's luggage, including Professor Slughorn's 2 large boxes of candied jackfruit. The procedures at the Ministry of Magic were very easy and quick. Evidently, as a well-known figure, Professor Dumbledore merely sent an appointment request and a letter to the Ministry of Magic, and all formalities were handled by the staff. The 4 of them said they were going through procedures, but in reality, they only signed a document and then received a portkey. Albus, with you personally leading the team this time, we are sure to achieve ultimate victory. This will be a groundbreaking milestone, marking our Britain and Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry's re-engagement with the international community after the Wizarding War. Before their departure, Fudge, dressed in a neat suit and bow tie, appeared in the room designated for international travelers using portkeys. He firmly shook Professor Dumbledore's hand, his face full of smiles, and recited his memorized lines with feeling. He looked so smug, his head held high, as if he too had achieved great merits. After exchanging pleasantries with the three professors, Fudge's gaze turned to Harley, his smile becoming even more gentle and benevolent. Harley, you must do your best. The honor of the British wizarding world rests on you. I believe that a genius like you can easily defeat other contestants, win the championship, and make the British wizarding world great again. Thank you for your blessing, I will do my utmost. Harley curtsied slightly, a sincere smile on her face. Chapter 137 French Time Traveler Rossel. After delivering a long, unheard speech, Fudge then voluntarily posed for a photo with the four. It was only then that Harley understood why they had arrived at the Ministry of Magic at 2 o'clock, but the portkey activation time was set for 3:30. Furthermore, the one responsible for taking photos this time was not a reporter from the Daily Prophet or other newspapers, but several Ministry of Magic employees. Harley roughly figured out Fudge's plan. If Hogwarts successfully won the championship this time, then news of the Minister for Magic's strong support for Hogwarts' participation in the Magical School Potion Championship would occupy the front pages of major newspapers, complete with photographic evidence. But if Hogwarts didn't win, then nothing would happen. After all, although this was an international competition representing the potion strength of a nation's young wizards, Britain hadn't participated in a long time, and naturally, there had been no publicity. One could even say that most British wizards didn't know about this competition. Since the public didn't know about it, if they failed, it would be as if the competition didn't exist. Fudge only ended his incessant chatter when the portkey was about to activate, and he quickly left the room. In the evening, Fudge had a banquet with the Malfoy family, and several pure-blood families would also be attending, so he needed to prepare now. Watching the room door close, Professor Slughorn shook his head. It's because of the existence of these politicians that I dislike entering the Ministry of Magic. That's not what you thought back then, Dumbledore ruthlessly retorted. What you said back then was clearly that if you became Minister for Magic, you wouldn't be able to slack off every day. Also, if I'm not mistaken, those students of yours who entered the wizarding world are now Albus. Slughorn exclaimed in a low voice, his smile almost faltering. Don't think I don't know, you were particularly good at writing sonnets back then. Do you need me to recite too? The two old men seemed to have forgotten about Snape and Harley next to them and suddenly started their self-deprecating banter. Harley's mouth twitched slightly, and she closed her eyes, pretending to be asleep. Professor Snape also looked embarrassed. Professor Slughorn had thought highly of him back then, so he couldn't say anything now and could only pretend not to hear. Dumbledore was about to say something else when he suddenly placed his finger on the portkey in front of him. 1 minute until activation, Harley, you just need to touch the portkey with one finger. Professor Slughorn also said no more and joined the others in touching the portkey. The portkey activated, and Harley felt an invisible hook grab her stomach, lifting her feet off the ground, and she flew up. Soon, the four landed steadily. Harley quickly looked around and found herself in a spacious room. The room was exquisitely decorated, with many paintings hanging on the walls, and the entire room was filled with an artistic atmosphere. However, Harley felt a bit strange, wondering why the decor here was so similar to the White Maple Palace in Intis, which Emperor Rosal had overseen the design of. Looking at the painting of Fontainebleau Palace on the wall, its exterior was almost identical to the White Maple Palace. Could it be that great minds think alike? Considering her own experiences, a hint of doubt and a bold guess suddenly appeared in Harley's mind. She quietly noted this information, preparing to verify it later. Harley did not continue to study the surrounding environment because a warm voice suddenly rang out. Oh, my dear Albus, and my good friend Horace, welcome to the French Ministry of Magic. A short old man strode forward. He had white hair, a cleanly shaved beard, and well-maintained skin with not a single wrinkle. The old man vigorously shook hands with Professor Dumbledore and Professor Slughorn respectively, a smile on his face. Then he looked at Harley and Professor Snape. This must be Professor Severus Snape and Harley Potter, right? I've heard your names for a long time. First time meeting, I am Giovanni Grigori, Minister for Magic of France. Welcome to France. Harley had to admit that following great figures indeed came with excellent treatment. Professor Dumbledore held a very high international standing, and Slughorn was also a renowned potions master, even more sought after than Dumbledore in some respects. Although Professor Snape was relatively low-key, his reputation in the potions circle was not low. The headquarters of the Extraordinary Potioneers Association was in France, and as Minister for Magic, Grigori had a very good personal relationship with the president of this association, which was related to potions masters. Therefore, Minister Grigori also knew Professor Snape, the low-key potions master, and Harley, the emerging potions prodigy. Under the leadership of the three great figures, Harley naturally enjoyed the privilege of being personally guided on a tour of the French Ministry of Magic by the esteemed Minister for Magic. France truly lived up to its reputation as a country full of artistic flair, with its entrance located in Place Furstenberg in the 6th arrondissement of Paris. Unlike the unartistic, dilapidated red telephone booth entrance of the British Ministry of Magic. To enter the French Ministry of Magic, one only needed to pause briefly by a tree near the square's fountain, and the tree's roots would rise from the ground, forming a magic birdcage elevator. The hall also perfectly matched the traditional French artistic style, with numerous constellation patterns painted on the arched ceiling and bas-reliefs carved into the surrounding walls. However, the more Harley looked, the more suspicious she became. The artistic style here was indeed very similar to the White Maple Palace. Could it be that Emperor Rosal, like me, also transmigrated from here? Harley's face showed the joy and curiosity of encountering a new environment, but in her heart, she was rapidly analyzing. That's right, this would explain why he could achieve such astonishing feats, reforming politics, overthrowing the angel families, establishing an empire, and even ushering in the Age of Steam. Considering this, combined with Intis's style and the European Muggle-style poems in his, Rosal's collected poems, it seems he was a European transmigrator, or rather, a French transmigrator. However, it also seems that precisely because of this, and because he didn't contact Mr. Dorr, he was ambushed and couldn't return to his homeland. Harley felt she had seen the whole truth of the matter and recalled the famous, Rosal's notes. Harley had once been fortunate enough to see a few pages of it, but she later sold it through an extraordinary gathering in Backland to a noble young lady. Thinking about it now, those unfamiliar characters were very likely the language of some small European country. Harley resolved to consult references upon returning to Hogwarts, or even buy a set of British encyclopedias to find more evidence. After touring the French Ministry of Magic and completing their registration, Minister Grigory returned to his duties. Harley and her group, guided by a Ministry of Magic employee, arrived at the apparition-only room. From here, they would travel directly to the Beauxbatons Academy of Magic Castle. Chapter 138 The Witch was born between heaven and earth, how can she live under the lotus? Horace, I trust you still remember the exact location of Beauxbatons. Professor Dumbledore looked at Slughorn. If you do, then I'll take Harley, and you take Severus, and we'll apparate directly there. Of course, my memory isn't that bad. Slughorn rolled his eyes, grabbing Professor Snape's arm. Harley also clasped Professor Dumbledore's arm, and the four instantly vanished from their spot. When they reappeared, their landing point was deep within a forest. Before them stood a long magic fence, inscribed with numerous alchemy runes that warned all who approached, hinting that underestimating them would come at a price. In the section of the fence directly facing the four, a large gate stood open. Madame Maxime was standing in front of the gate, with a beautiful young woman with bright silver hair and clear blue eyes, dressed in a white gown, beside her. Upon seeing Dumbledore, Madame Maxime's eyes lit up, and she strode over, extending her hand adorned with many opulent opal rings. Dumbledore lightly kissed it, his lips not touching the back of her hand. Though he was also tall, he barely had to bend down to kiss her hand. "Welcome, dear Professor Dumbledore," Madame Maxime said in a low voice. "Welcome to Beauxbatons Academy of Magic. I have been looking forward to your arrival." "Thank you very much, Madame Maxime. I hope you are well," Dumbledore said, looking up as he offered his blessing. Harley looked at the height difference between the two, a smile playing on her lips, but she suppressed it. She then noticed that Fleur, behind Madame Maxime, also seemed to be aware of the adorable height difference. However, the young woman managed to suppress her laughter, though it was a bit of a struggle. "Harley, long time no see." After greeting all the professors, Madame Maxime bent down and gave Harley a warm hug. "That wool scarf you gave me is of such good quality. It's hard to imagine you have such skill. Thank you for the compliment. I'm glad you like it," Harley said crisply. "Let's go, Mr. and Mrs. Nicholas Flamel are already waiting in the headmaster's office." Madame Maxime released Harley and waved her hand. "We old friends can catch up. Quite a few things have been happening in Russia recently. Fleur, why don't you show Harley around and introduce her to Beauxbatons?" "Yes, Madame Maxime," Fleur replied respectfully, then took small steps to Harley's side. Fleur enthusiastically hugged Harley and lightly kissed Harley's cheek. "I never expected, Harley, that you would be Hogwarts representative. When Madame Maxime told me yesterday, I couldn't believe it at all. I know you're very good at potion. But I really didn't expect you to be participating in the competition in only your second year. What's the big deal? You're only in your 5th year, aren't you? I bet you're also going to participate in the competition, right? Your potion skills are also very strong. Harley held Fleur's hand, and the two walked towards the castle. The professors had already left, so the two relaxed considerably. Of course, Fleur proudly lifted her head, an expression of triumph on her face. Though not yet 15, the young woman was already 4 inches taller than Harley. Today, Fleur was wearing a silver-white dress, which made her neck appear even more slender, full of charm with the enhancement of her Vila blood. How can even a 7th-year student in our school compare to me? Fleur's tone was calm, but her words were anything but reserved. Your potion skills last year, if you were in our school, would be at the level of a student at the end of their 6th year. As for now, I imagine even graduates can't compare to you. I heard from my father that you've been corresponding with him, discussing various potion problems. Thank you for the compliment, Miss Delacour. Harley's lips curved upwards. I think you should call me big sister or elder sister. I'm older than you. Fleur spun around, swaying in front of Harley, her bright silver hair flying in the air, stirring up a fragrant breeze. A slender finger lifted Harley's chin, while Fleur's other hand was placed behind her delicate waist, her body leaning slightly forward, looking down at Harley. Come on, call me elder sister so I can hear it. The first time I saw you, I wanted you to call me that. Harley was first stunned, then her face showed annoyance. What a joke. The dignified demoness of Unaging, always the aggressive one. How could the demoness of Unaging, born between heaven and earth, be beneath anyone? What did you say? De la Cour sister. The young woman in front of Fleur instantly vanished, and at the same time, both of Fleur's hands were forcibly placed behind her back. That playful voice continued, Good sister, it seems you're not doing so well. Harley had appeared behind Fleur at some unknown point. Looking at Fleur's fair, slender neck, Harley resisted the instinct her sequence gave her, merely licking her lips. Although she and Fleur were good friends, their relationship hadn't reached that level yet. If it were Hermione, Harley's tongue wouldn't be licking her own lips. The two young women constantly played around, their waterfall-like bright silver and black hair fluttering up and down, dazzling to the eye. After a while, Fleur gave in. Wrong, I surrender. Harley, your stamina is really good. HMPH. Harley let out a delicate snort, proudly holding her head high. The two began to tour the Beauxbatons castle, with Fleur providing explanations to Harley. Beauxbatons castle is situated in the Pyrenees. The castle used to be only 1/3 its current size, and there was no magnificent estate outside. But what can you do when they produced an alchemist like Nicolas Flamel? Nicolas and Perronel's alma mater was Beauxbatons, and as masters who could create the Philosopher's Stone, they donated large sums to their alma mater. So now, Beauxbatons castle is even larger than Hogwarts, and the estate is filled with various precious flowers and plants. Standing on the highest tower of the castle, one can always enjoy the beautiful scenery of the Pyrenees, watching the moon cast its light over the surrounding forests. However, Harley was more interested in Beauxbatons' library, but unfortunately, the collection of books in this library was far inferior to Hogwarts. Although Beauxbatons produced a Nicolas Flamel, the old man is still alive and can continue to make the Philosopher's Stone, so he can live for a very long time. Therefore, while the number of ordinary books in the Beauxbatons library is greater than Hogwarts, the number of top-tier magic books is very few. This library is very large, luxuriously equipped with sofas for all seats, and various paintings hanging on the walls. The library was empty. Fleur herself had found the key to bring Harley in. After all, it was summer vacation, and apart from a few professors who lived in the school year-round, Beauxbatons did not keep outsiders. The reason Fleur could come was because she would represent Beauxbatons in this competition along with another 7th-year girl. When the time comes, I'll make sure to show you the special skills my father taught me. Fleur, like a proud swan, fully released her radiance. Then I'll look forward to it. Professor Snape also taught me some advanced potions. Harley's imposing aura was in no way inferior. Chapter 139 Nico is old. After leaving the library, Fleur took Harley up to the highest tower in Beauxbatons castle. From here, one could easily overlook the entire Beauxbatons estate. If the special magic constantly active in the tower was used, visitors could even enjoy the beautiful scenery of the entire Pyrenees mountains. Time flew by, and soon it was evening. Madame Maxime prepared a sumptuous dinner in the castle's Great Hall. Harley had to admit that Beauxbatons' Great Hall was much better decorated than Hogwarts. Beauxbatons' ceiling was enchanted glass, randomly displaying beautiful scenes from the Pyrenees mountains. Unlike Hogwarts, Beauxbatons did not have houses. The Great Hall's walls were carved with the deeds and portraits of the school's famous alumni, and decorated with flowers and ribbons. According to Fleur, the school believed this was conducive to fostering unity among everyone. Although there were no houses, Beauxbatons, like Hogwarts, chose to dine at long tables. However, considering the smaller number of people today, Madame Maxime moved the usual long tables to the edge of the Great Hall and replaced them with large round tables. At this moment, the tables were already laden with steaming delicacies, and from time to time, even more delicious food would appear out of thin air. Bouillabaisse, caviar, coq au vin, French blue lobster. Do you usually eat this well? As Harley and Fleur entered the Great Hall, Harley keenly detected Professor Slughorn's exclamation. Of course not. Madame Maxime's voice was much louder, even Fleur, standing at the Great Hall's entrance, could hear her. Thanks to the house elves Mr. and Mrs. Nicholas Flamel lent us. You should know, Beauxbaton's elves can't make such exquisite delicacies. We usually prefer fish soup, croissants, tender lamb, and various desserts. That's wonderful, Professor Slughorn sighed, much better than Britain. Although many people remain stubborn, everyone knows that Britain is a true culinary desert. Harley didn't use her assassin's hearing to listen further, as the two had already approached. Quite a few people were already seated around the round table, with Mr. and Mrs. Nicholas Flamel sitting beside Principal Maxime. Several other important figures Harley knew had also arrived. The one next to father is the current president of the Extraordinary Potioneers Association, Hector Dagworth Bernard. I think you should know him. That's our potions professor, Dirk Bebel, a relative of Democritus Bebel, the inventor of Wolfsbane potion. Fleur quietly introduced the people she knew and didn't know to Harley. Harley still had some impression, such as the current president of the Extraordinary Potioneers Association, an old man over 170 years old. Because he so admired the founder of the Extraordinary Potioneers Association, Hector Dagworth Granger, he changed his own name, vowing to become a potions master. He later succeeded, becoming famous in the wizarding world for improving the extremely difficult Polyjuice potion, reducing the brewing time from over a year to within 6 months. There was also Beauxbaton's potions professor. Harley occasionally saw his name when corresponding with Fleur and exchanged a few words with him through letters. However, most of these figures were related to potions, so Harley speculated that they probably also wanted to take advantage of Beauxbaton's transportation to the competition venue. Harley greeted everyone in turn, and finally, Perenelle called her to sit beside her. Fleur also sat close to Harley, both of them sitting primly and upright. Harley, how is Beauxbaton's castle? Everyone was chatting while eating, when Perenelle suddenly asked a fatal question amidst the laughter. Fleur must have already shown you around, right? The gazes of several Hogwarts or Beauxbaton's professors subtly shifted over, and others listened with interest. Hogwarts possesses the weight of history, while Beauxbaton's is filled with artistic splendor. As for more profound information, based on a simple exploration of this castle alone, I don't think I can make an accurate evaluation. Harley reacted instantly and gave her answer. What a clever little wizard, Hector praised with a chuckle. Harley, you truly have a talent for understanding potions. Your ideas from the last research on the invisibility potion greatly inspired me. I tried your suggestion of replacing the fresh leaves of illusionary flower and shadow tree with mirage grass, and the effect was indeed better. Oh, really? That can indeed significantly reduce costs. But I remember 260 years ago, Grillo attempted this replacement, and it failed. Mr. Delacour was very interested upon hearing this and directly interjected into the conversation. This is thanks to Harley's ingenious idea. She treated the mirage grass with a special method. Harley listened to the potions master's discussion with a humble smile on her face, her heart unfazed. The demoness sect had developed similar potions based on the witch pathway's invisibility ability, compressing costs to the extreme and maximizing cost effectiveness. So, after multiple attempts and material substitutions, Harley easily improved it. However, Hector was indeed worthy of his position as president of the Extraordinary Potioneers Association, effortlessly improving Harley's formula and making the effect of the substituted materials more stable. Originally, Harley's potion could only last 1 to 2 hours and occasionally broke invisibility. But after Hector slightly changed the proportions of other materials, the potion's effect could last for over 3 hours. You can actually improve potion formulas yourself. That's amazing, Fleur whispered to Harley's ear, exclaiming. Yes, I've heard several people marvel at Harley's talent, Perenelle chimed in from the side. Nicholas always complains that if only Harley liked alchemy. He's always wanted such an apprentice to pass on his legacy. He's practically dying of envy upon hearing that such a genius has emerged in potions. Indeed, if Harley also had such a talent for alchemy and liked alchemy, that would be wonderful. Nicholas also said with a smile, after all, I'm too old, I can no longer brew the Philosopher's Stone, and I urgently need to find someone to inherit my techniques. You've already lived enough, you don't even look at how old you are. I used so many potions and barely managed to live to 200 years old. These old folks were already very familiar with each other, and their conversations were unrestrained, occasionally dropping some significant information. The dinner ended in such a joyful atmosphere. Hector even invited Harley to join the Extraordinary Potioneers Association and offered to personally vouch for her. However, Professor Slughorn unceremoniously snatched the position of guarantor. After all, this was a Hogwarts student, what kind of sense would it make for Beauxbatons to vouch for her? In the evening, Madame Maxime specially arranged a room for Harley, the 7th-year student who lived there had just graduated. Harley, dragging the luggage she had just received from Principal Dumbledore, entered the girls' dormitory. Here, like Hogwarts, 5 people shared a room, which was also decorated with vases and hung with decorations left by the senior student. Chapter 140, Hot Springs with Farong. Harley had just thrown her suitcase by the bed when the room door suddenly opened. Fleur slipped in with a box, closed the door, and smiled at Harley. "Big sister was afraid you'd be lonely, so I'm here to keep you company tonight. Aren't you touched?" "Touched, incredibly touched," Harley replied without looking up. "You truly are my good big sister. Can I give you a kiss?" Fleur laughed, pulling toiletries out of the box. "That won't do. I don't have any thoughts of dating yet. But I can offer you something else. Come on, I'll take you to the prefect's bathroom for a bath. Both the male and female prefect's bathrooms at Beauxbatons have special magical hot springs, and I happen to be a prefect this year, so I have the right to take you in for a soak." Magical hot springs. Harley looked up, her face filled with shock. How luxurious. Yes, magical hot springs. They use magic to simulate the environment of a hot spring. Essentially, a magical water source was opened underground, and alchemy was constantly applied to it. As groundwater passes through the magical water source, it gushes out, forming 2 magical hot springs. Just open the switch for the water source, and a hot spring will form quickly. However, the magic consumption is quite high, so only prefects and the student council president can enjoy them. This also serves to motivate students to strive for improvement. Fleur pulled a white bathrobe from her bag and gestured with it towards Harley. "The hot spring has already been prepared by me. This is the bathrobe I brought for you. It seems my judgment was good, it should fit you perfectly." Harley felt a bit regretful. She actually thought one could enjoy a hot spring without wearing a bathrobe. However, since this was the custom, she could only follow it. Wait, as she took the bathrobe, she noticed that it was pure white and made of a light, thin fabric. And this robe was for soaking in the hot spring. Before that, it seemed one had to wash thoroughly to avoid contaminating the water. Then it was fine. She wondered which genius came up with this method, it was really good. Harley, carrying various toiletries, followed Fleur into the prefect's bathroom. The bathroom was on the first floor, extremely spacious, and completely empty. After thoroughly washing, Fleur, wearing her bathrobe, sat by the hot spring. However, Fleur's hair was too long, so she didn't bother with a shower cap, letting her long hair fall behind her. Fleur's smooth, white lotus root-like calves gently kicked the water, getting used to its temperature. A moment later, Fleur, like a merperson, slid into the water. Eventually, her entire body was submerged. Her silvery long hair floated on the surface of the water, shimmering under the magical lights on the ceiling and the steam above the hot spring. "Come on down," Fleur called out to Harley. "Soaking in a hot spring is truly a pleasure. Coming right away." Harley also stopped trying to stuff her long hair into the shower cap and quickly crouched by the hot spring. Harley extended a small hand, wanting to test the water temperature. But someone gently pulled her from under the water, and Harley, who hadn't used any extraordinary abilities due to her relaxation, tumbled into the water, landing on a soft body. A moment later, Harley and Fleur surfaced, Fleur's face still bearing a mischievous grin. "Got you with a sneak attack, didn't I? I bet you never guessed I can hold my breath underwater for 10 minutes. That's amazing. Is that an ability from your Vila heritage?" Harley smoothed the damp strands of hair from her temples behind her ears. Earlier, these playful hairs had stuck to Harley's already reddening cheeks, making her feel a bit uncomfortable. "Ah, soaking in a bathrobe is so comfortable. The feeling of the clothes floating and occasionally gently touching my body truly mesmerizes me." Fleur leaned against the edge of the hot spring, her head resting on a cloth, and closed her eyes. Her bathrobe was soaked, and in the spacious, steamy hot spring, she appeared faintly, yet more enchantingly alluring. Harley glanced, then lowered her head and closed her eyes. "I've completed my sequence 6 acting, remember, I've completed my acting." After soaking for a long time, both their faces were flushed, and their limbs felt somewhat soft and weak. "Let's get out, we can't soak anymore," Fleur said languidly, her voice having a tingling sensation. The two left the hot spring and changed into their pajamas. Harley conveniently used black flame to help Fleur dry her hair. Thank you very much. I didn't realize your control over magic was so strong, Fleur said, rubbing her long hair with a sigh. It's nothing, just a small favor. This is one of the magic I'm best at. Harley carefully controlled the black flame, letting it flow over her hair. The next day, the two slept until 8 in the morning before getting up. However, considering Beauxbatons planned to depart after lunch at 2 in the afternoon, this time wasn't considered late. The thoughtful house elf had already placed breakfast by their beds. Breakfast consisted of croissants with milk, as well as cheese, fried eggs, and bacon. These were no different from Hogwarts breakfast, but Beauxbatons had a few extra colorful small cakes, making the breakfast appear more exquisite. In the morning, Fleur took Harley to explore more details of Beauxbatons. After lunch, Madame Maxime showcased Beauxbatons' most magnificent mode of transportation, a giant powder blue carriage. The carriage was as large as a house, with hanging eaves. The carriage door was emblazoned with 2 golden, crossed wands, each emitting 3 stars. This was the Beauxbatons' crest. Pulling the carriage were 12 winged, silver-maned golden flying horses, abraxans. Each of these horses was as large as an elephant. When someone boarded the carriage, they would always curiously shake their enormous heads, their fiery red eyes rolling around, wanting to look back. Beauxbatons is really rich. If I remember correctly, the cost of raising these abraxans is much higher than that of dragons, Harley exclaimed with a sigh of poverty. Fleur stuck out her tongue and didn't respond. The undetectable extension charm had been cast inside the carriage, so its actual area was much larger than it appeared from the outside. Any door with a blue wand on it is a room available for lodging. To check in, tap the door with your wand, and the wand symbol on the door will turn red. Madame Maxime announced loudly before boarding the carriage. However, we won't need to spend too much time, it will only take 2 hours to reach our destination. After all, my abraxans are very fast. The abraxans pulling the carriage in front seemed to understand Madame Maxime's words, raising their heads high as if in agreement. Harley and Fleur boarded the carriage with their suitcases, and the 2 girls found a secluded room. Harley also saw the senior who was starting her 7th year this term. She seemed to have just arrived today. However, the senior was very cold towards the two, or more accurately, very cold towards Fleur, and by extension, indifferent to Harley. Considering Fleur's beauty and charm, Harley understood the situation. After all, similar situations occurred when witches appeared at noble banquets, so Harley was already used to it. Soon, the carriage began to move. Through the magical glass, Harley watched as the abraxans first galloped forward, their massive bodies shaking the surrounding trees, causing leaves to fall in a rustling cascade. Then, the abraxans flapped their wings vigorously, soared into the sky, and disappeared among the clouds. Chapter 141 Magic Garden. It took the carriage quite a while to reach its destination. The competition venue was on the outskirts of the Extraordinary Potioneers Association's Magical Garden, and this competition was jointly organized by the Extraordinary Potioneers Association, the International Confederation of Wizards, and various magical schools. The magical garden contained many precious herbs that were hard to find in the outside world, so the garden was hidden by magic. To guard against unscrupulous individuals, the Extraordinary Potioneers Association also asked Nicholas Flamel to set up layers of protection on the periphery using alchemy and various precious materials. These defenses were inspired by the Goblet of Fire, with special alchemical runes inscribed within them, allowing them to exist almost permanently as long as they had sufficient magic and were not damaged by external forces. To secure Nicholas Flamel's help, the Extraordinary Potioneers Association and the International Confederation of Wizards jointly signed a magical contract with Nicholas. As long as these two organizations existed, Nicholas, his descendants, and his apprentices could enter the magical garden and receive a certain amount of materials each year. As for the more detailed contents of the contract, Dumbledore did not mention them to Harley, so Harley did not inquire. When the carriage flew into the air at a certain location, the surrounding scenery suddenly spun for a moment, then returned to normal. At this time, Harley was accompanying Nicholas and Professor Dumbledore, drinking tea and chatting in the carriage's common room. Nicholas looked at the scene outside the window, which had twisted for a moment, and sighed softly. "We have entered the magical garden. It's incredible. I still can't understand this alchemy, and I'm not sure what magic causes the entrance to appear. Wasn't that set up by you?" Harley seemed to have heard something extraordinary and quickly asked for guidance. "The outer defenses were set up by me, but the entrance was not." Nicholas shook his head. "I originally wanted to follow the example of Azkaban prison in Britain and set up specific portkeys for entering and exiting the magical garden. However, the Extraordinary Potioneers Association produced some alchemical items made by gnomes, which spatially connected several specific locations with points on the periphery of the magical garden. Before they used these alchemical items, I specifically studied them, but even with my abilities, I couldn't replicate them. Even your abilities couldn't replicate them. Harley was somewhat shocked, but deep down, it wasn't that surprising. She seemed to recall something and asked softly, what if these alchemical items get damaged? Wouldn't they be irreparable? Professor Dumbledore chuckled. In fact, the effect of these alchemical items has been weakening. The entrances connected to locations within the magical garden are slowly decreasing and shrinking, and the existing entrances are also becoming unstable. Some alchemical items have even suffered some damage, and the magic infused into them is leaking away. A few years ago, the Extraordinary Potioneers Association even invited Nicholas and me to research whether these alchemical items could be repaired. And then, neither of us had any solutions. Professor Dumbledore shrugged. Although I received the legacy of those gnomes, I am still powerless. Nicholas took a sip of tea, his voice very calm. But it's not a big problem. Once those alchemical items are completely damaged, we'll just use the entry and exit method I provided. At that time, I can also take the alchemical items to study them, dismantle them, and examine them thoroughly. The carriage quickly landed on the ground. Madame Maxime drew her wand and waved it lightly, and the golden spiral staircase appeared. Fleur had already returned to Madame Maxime's side, and Harley followed behind Professor Dumbledore. After getting off the carriage, Harley noticed a village ahead. A wizard stood at the entrance of the village, holding a form and a wand. Bobatons in Hogwarts. And potions masters qualified to watch the competition. Please register. The wizard smiled and came forward, respectfully speaking in French to the two principals. After completing the registration, the guiding wizard led everyone to the accommodation provided by the Extraordinary Potioneers Association, introducing the village along the way. Fortunately, almost everyone in the team understood French. The only one who wasn't as familiar with the language, Professor Snape, had also brought the translation device provided by Professor Dumbledore. I wonder how the other magical schools solve the translation problem, Harley whispered in French into Fleur's ear. Who knows? The Muggle society does this better, at least from what I understand. English seems to be the international common language. I wonder if French is an international common language, Fleur replied in English. After a full year of practice, there were no longer any communication barriers between the two of them. However, it seemed they might still need to take out their translation devices again, as there were several signposts along the way with unfamiliar writing. As they passed a certain sign, Harley's pupils suddenly contracted, then she quietly slowed her pace, fully memorizing the content on the sign before catching up with the main group. Why did you fall behind just now? When Harley slowed down, Fleur also slightly slowed her pace, ensuring that if Harley got too far from the main group, she could still guide her. Nothing, I saw a strange script and was a bit interested, Harley replied softly. Soon, everyone arrived at a bar. Outside the bar hung an exquisite plaque, on which was written, Home of Potions. Contestants and their accompanying teachers will stay here during the competition, and if you potions masters do not own property here, you can also choose to stay here. The guiding wizard said respectfully. Many houses in the village on the outskirts of the magical garden belonged to potions masters, but those potions masters themselves had achieved extremely high accomplishments and contributed extraordinary techniques to earn these houses. Although the masters only had the right to reside in these houses, not the right to sell them, nor could they pass them on to apprentices or descendants, it still made potions makers yearn for them. One must know that being able to live in the village on the outskirts of the magical garden was in itself an affirmation of their strength. The Hogwarts and Bobatons teams separated, and as for the potions masters who had hitched a ride, most had already left on their own upon landing. Albus, would you like to stay at my place? Professor Slughorn asked. I still have a house here, though I haven't been there in a long time. No need, Severus and I will stay here with Harley, so she can interact more with her peers. All right then, Professor Slughorn conjured a piece of parchment with a small map on it. I live at the location marked in red on the map. There's still a week until the competition starts. Harley, you can come to my place for a final warm-up before the match. Harley nodded in agreement, but her mind was still pondering another matter. The bar's waiter led everyone upstairs and into their respective rooms. Before entering the room, Harley seemingly casually pulled out a piece of paper and wrote a few words on it, asking the waiter. Excuse me, what language is this? This is Japanese. This line of text is a signpost for Mahoutokoro, the Japanese magical school. The waiter glanced at the sign and replied skillfully in English. Thank you very much, Harley said softly, then closed the door. Chapter 142 The game begins. After Harley put away her luggage, she first briefly checked if there were any surveillance magic in the room. After confirming that the ritual had no reaction, Harley took out the magic mirror she carried with her. Favored one of disaster and calamity. Harley whispered her honorific name, using the magic mirror for divination. Orthodox magic mirror divination is performed by ritual, praying to a higher existence for divination. Generally speaking, those who can respond to magic mirror divination on a global scale are at least powerhouses at the earthly angel level. However, if a saint of sequence 3 happens to be within the acceptable range of the magic mirror divination, they can also intentionally respond to the divination. Of course, magic mirror divination can also choose to divine towards the spirit world itself, but the effect is not as good as other divinations. Harley's strength had recovered a lot now, so she could barely use the magic mirror for divination and respond herself. 10 minutes later, through the automatic response of the mythical creature form, Harley forcibly recalled the content of the few Rosal's notes she had read. Only a very few characters are the same, but many characters, from a formatting perspective, feel like they come from the same source. Harley finished her divination, lay on the bed, and pondered. After returning to Britain, I'll buy a set of Japanese dictionaries and translate them by comparison. But if that's the case, Emperor Rosal's origin becomes questionable. White Maple Palace is French style, but he used Japanese characters. No, it's not necessarily Japanese, just as the United States also uses English, this script might have another origin. Harley felt a headache coming on, so she stopped thinking and began to tidy up her room. Over the next week, Harley resumed her repetitive and fulfilling life. Every morning, she went to Slughorn's residence to practice brewing potions and received guidance from Hogwarts, past and present potions masters. Time flew by, and it was the day before the competition. Out of the 11 magic schools registered with the International Confederation of Wizards Worldwide, 8 had sent students. This is quite normal, Professor Slughorn said, accustomed to the situation. If there are no excellent students, then why participate? To bring shame to the school. In fact, Hogwarts didn't send any students in previous years. After all, their level wasn't good enough, and they would just be eliminated in the first round, only providing more jokes for others. Harley listened silently, quickly tidying up the cauldron in her hands. Child, you will represent Hogwarts in the competition tomorrow. Your skill is not much weaker than mine when I was 17. Although this is also because I lacked guidance from famous teachers back then, and now you have 2 potions masters personally teaching you, it's still enough to prove your talent. Professor Slughorn lay in his lounge chair, continuing to speak leisurely. Don't be nervous. Follow what you've learned step by step, and winning the championship will be a very easy thing. Professor Snape, who was beside him, said nothing, leaving the pre-competition motivation entirely to Professor Slughorn. After all, Professor Slughorn had a great talent in this area. I understand, Professor. I won't disappoint you. When Harley woke up the next day, she felt great. The breakfast provided by the tavern was plentiful, and Harley had a hearty appetite, eating more than usual. However, it seemed that the other contestants didn't have much appetite. The bar was filled with a tense atmosphere. Fleur brought her breakfast to Harley's side. How are your preparations? I haven't seen you these past few days. I've been at Professor Slughorn's making final preparations before the competition. Harley swallowed the bread in her mouth. As for preparation, you can never be too prepared. Fleur rested her chin on her hand, a smile suddenly blossoming on her face. Don't be too modest, my father said you are the most hopeful to compete with me for the championship. Really? Mr. Delacour thinks so highly of me. Harley also smiled sweetly. In the hall, the contestants were originally eating and scanning their opponents with their eyes. But as they looked at Harley and Fleur's smiles, they all froze. Even some female contestants, upon seeing Harley, unconsciously slowed their movements, their hearts beating faster. A young male wizard from Mahoutokoro in Japan dropped the cup in his hand directly onto the table, and the scalding tea burned his calf. Do you think they can compete with us? Fleur disdainfully glanced at the contestants in the hall, her eyes filled with arrogance and contempt. They can't even withstand my most basic charm. Lacking such willpower, they are only fit to be cannon fodder. The extraordinary charm released by both was simultaneously suppressed, and the contestants also came back to their senses. Most of the contestants' faces showed expressions mixed with fear and shame, but some contestants stared at the two, openly revealing their admiration and affection. However, Harley and Fleur ignored them and quickly finished their breakfast. After drinking the last drop of milk in her cup, Harley gently wiped the corners of her mouth with a handkerchief, then stood up. Let's go to the competition venue. I think the professors are already waiting there. Indeed, staying here is too boring. Fleur also stood up elegantly, tossing her waterfall-like silvery long hair, and walked out of the tavern with Harley. The first round of the Magical School Potion Championship was at 10 in the morning, held in the square of this wizard village. The square had been decorated, with 15 tables spaced far apart to prevent students from influencing each other. At the end of the square was a large platform enchanted with magic, with many chairs on it. It seemed the judges were going to watch the competition from there. Fleur returned to Madame Maxime's side, while Harley stood with the two potions professors. "Professor, do you know who the judges are?" Harley asked softly. Professor Slughorn stroked his plump chin, a reminiscent expression on his face. "If I remember correctly, the president of the Extraordinary Potioneers Association will serve as a judge, and some of the potions masters who are qualified to live in this wizard village will also be selected as judges. As for how many will be selected, it depends on how many schools are participating in the competition. The International Confederation of Wizards will also send someone, but his task is only to assist in supervision and handle various disciplinary violations. As for the actual scoring, he will not interfere." Harley nodded, stopped reviewing, and began to close her eyes to rest. Time flew by to 10 o'clock, and all contestants were in position. After Hector, the president of the Extraordinary Potioneers Association, gave a brief opening speech, he announced the content of the first round, brewing the draft of living death within 2 hours. According to the rules, the judges would select the 10 best performing contestants out of the 15 present to advance to the second round. Cauldrons, potion ingredients, and other auxiliary items appeared on the empty tables in front of the contestants. However, there were more potion ingredients and auxiliary tools than needed for brewing the draft of living death, and contestants had to select the correct materials from them. There were 3 portions of all ingredients, but in reality, contestants only had 2 chances, because one portion of the ingredients did not meet the standards. This required contestants to also pay attention to the quality of the ingredients they chose during the brewing process. So, the first round of the competition seemed simple, but in reality, it was a relatively comprehensive test for the students. Chapter 143, You can be humble with others, but forget about it with me. With the fireworks from the referee's wand tip, the competition officially began. Several contestants quickly lit their fires and casually picked up ingredients, adding them to their cauldrons, looking confident. At the judges' table, an old woman with white hair but smooth skin watched the scene, shaking her head slightly, covering her mouth, and saying to the referee next to her, "Are the contestants from Koldovstorts and Mahautokoro so careless now? They don't even check the quality of the ingredients before using them." However, looking at the entire arena, only a few contestants made such a basic mistake. Although the organizers only announced that ingredients would be provided, they did not mention the small trap of mixing in excess or substandard ingredients among the organizer-provided ones. But upon noticing that the quantity and variety of ingredients were clearly too much, most contestants still chose to check them. Harley quickly selected enough ingredients to brew 2 portions of draft of living death based on her memory. Then, she began to weigh the valerian root, while simultaneously lighting the flame under her cauldron, allowing the pure water inside to boil. Harley quickly followed the standard steps. 10 minutes later, Harley's potion had turned into a uniform tea-brown liquid. This was the ideal state for the potion at this stage of brewing. Bang! Harley was concentrating on her work when a sudden explosion sounded from afar, and a foul odor spread. Following a series of chain reactions, several contestants' cauldrons experienced problems to varying degrees. Are other contestants' skills so poor? Don't they know to check the ingredients before brewing potions? While the potion in her cauldron was heating, Harley fanned away the stench with her hand, complaining inwardly. After all, such a smell clearly indicated the use of valerian root that was too old. Harley didn't pay much attention to the others' performances and continued her work. After adding uniformly sliced saprophyros beans to the cauldron, the potion immediately turned a pale snow blue color. According to the book, at this point, one only needed to add the juice exuded from the saprophyros beans. However, Harley still chose to add the saprophyros bean slices as well, as this could stabilize the potion's efficacy. But this method also had its drawbacks. In the subsequent stirring process, if the force and stirring frequency could not be maintained at a specific level, the potion would be directly ruined. However, Harley trusted her skill and believed in the powerful control over her body provided by her Sequence 5 Assassin extraordinary ability. One referee clearly noticed Harley's rapid progress and innovation in the potion formula, gently tapping another referee next to him. Both of them focused their attention on Harley, whispering to each other occasionally. After various color changes, the color in Harley's cauldron eventually returned to the clear, water-like transparency it had when the stirring was complete. Harley extinguished the flame under the cauldron, and after confirming the potion was fine, she poured it into a nearby bottle and sealed it with magic. A referee, who had apparently descended from the judge's table at some point, came to Harley's side. "Contestant Harley Potter, have you finished making it?" "Yes, I have. I'd like to submit my result now," Harley replied softly. "All right, please keep your table as is, slowly leave your position, and do not disturb others. The referees will comprehensively score your results and process, and the announcement will be made after the competition ends." The referee nodded, quickly leaving with the small bottle. Harley also put away her wand and walked towards the exit. As the first contestant to leave her position, Harley naturally received the most attention. After all, besides Harley, Fleur, who had the fastest progress in the arena, was still in the low-temperature heating stage, her potion transforming from clear and transparent to a vibrant orange. As for more contestants, they were still in the stirring stage, or had already failed and were rebrewing. There was even a contestant from Koldovstorts who seemed unaware of why he had failed, now stroking his bald head, looking troubled at the blue mixture in his cauldron. In such a comparison, professors from other schools discussed animatedly, turning their gaze towards Hogwarts' position. Their gazes were either jealous, envious, or scrutinizing, some even carrying malice. However, Harley didn't care. "Well done, Harley." Professor Slughorn was the first to congratulate Harley after she returned to Hogwarts' seat. Professor Dumbledore also smiled at her, seemingly very pleased with Harley's performance. Professor Snape remained expressionless, but still gave a slight nod, expressing his approval. "You were indeed the first to finish brewing the potion. I knew my judgment wouldn't be wrong." Mr. Delacour also came from Beauxbatons to Hogwarts' seats. He himself was present as a potions master to watch the competition, so he naturally didn't have to remain in his seat like the professors from Beauxbatons. "Fleur's progress will still take at least another 15 minutes, she's far from catching up to you. It seems you are very likely the champion of this magical school potion championship." "You jest," Harley said modestly, "my strength is not enough, many people have a chance to contend for the championship." "You can be modest with others, but there's no need to be modest with me." Mr. Delacour shook his head. "Don't forget, we've corresponded for a whole year, exchanging so much potions knowledge. And your ingenious ideas when chatting with other old friends, they sometimes write to me to share as well. So I've long been convinced that your skill is not much worse than ours when we were young. What you lack now is just the accumulation of time. After all, some potions take over 6 months to brew, and various unexpected situations can arise during that time. These still require time to accumulate. Of course, this is our Hogwarts student." Professor Slughorn didn't let Harley continue, naturally taking over the conversation, his face beaming with a smile. "Her potions professor, Severus, is my student. Could my skill still be questionable?" As time passed, contestants also successively finished the competition and returned to their school seats. Most of the contestants selected to participate in the potions competition were skilled enough. Except for the bald contestant from Koldovstorts who clearly hadn't spent much time preparing this potion, everyone else submitted a passable answer sheet. The whistle signaling the end of the first round finally blew. The potions masters at the judges' table descended one after another, beginning to inspect the quality of the potions brewed by the contestants. It was clear that the small bottle of potion Harley had submitted earlier had already been passed around and studied. But almost all the referees still specifically came to Harley's cauldron, scooping out some to observe its color, or checking the remaining ingredients on Harley's table. One particularly focused old man even wanted to take a sip. However, he was held back by an old woman next to him, as this was draught of living death, not some intelligence-boosting or brain-refreshing potion. If he really took a sip, would he still be able to be a referee afterwards? These elders were very old, mostly over 100 years old, and many relied on self-made potions to sustain their lives. So even if they chose to test potions on themselves during their usual experiments, they would not easily take an antidote, so as not to break the fragile balance within their bodies. Chapter 144. 3 people share a bed, definitely not crowded. Although the average age of this group of judges was over 100 years old, their movements were not slow at all. The judges quickly finished inspecting all the finished products, as the quality of most works could be determined with a glance. As one potions master in the audience put it, successful works were almost all alike, while failed potions had uniquely wrong methods. After a brief discussion and summing up their opinions, the final results were quickly announced. Mr. Hector loudly declared the results. As everyone expected, Harley easily scored full marks. After all, she was the first to finish the competition, and the quality of her potion was indeed very high, even showing some innovation beyond the original formula. If it weren't for the fact that a perfect score was only 100 points and there were no bonus points, the old judges would have really wanted to give Harley a higher score and invite her to discuss potion-making insights. When the judges announced the results, many people looked towards Harley. The gazes from the professor and contestants were filled with complex emotions. The judges didn't care about all that, they quickly announced all the scores and named the top 10. These 10 contestants will participate in the second round 10 days from now. The competition rules have already been communicated to the representatives of each academy. We hope everyone will give their best. After leaving the square, Professor Snape, the actual team leader, gave Harley a small break, allowing her to relax for an afternoon, with plans to discuss the content of the second competition in the evening. The professors dispersed, and Harley wandered alone in the village when she suddenly felt someone tap her shoulder. Harley turned her head and saw Fleur. A silver-haired little girl was with her. "Harley, congratulations on taking first place in the first round of the competition. I really didn't expect you to brew it so quickly and with such good quality," Fleur exclaimed. "You too. The judges even gave you 97 points, Harley said with a smile, her hands clasped behind her back. "That's different. According to Papa, you got 100 points because the highest score is only 100. Fleur wanted to say more, but Harley felt inexplicably awkward, so she changed the subject. "Aren't you going to introduce me to this beautiful little girl? This is my younger sister, Gabrielle. Papa only brought her today." Fleur's attention was indeed diverted, and she pulled the little girl in front of her. "Gabrielle, introduce yourself to Big Sister Harley." "Hello, Big Sister Harley, I'm Gabrielle Delacour." The little girl's face broke into a sweet smile. "Big Sister Harley, do you know? Sister often talks about you when she comes home, and she regrets why you're not at Bobaton's." Harley greeted the little girl, bending down to ruffle Gabrielle's hair. It had to be said, this silver hair felt really good to the touch, not much worse than Hermione's messy brown hair. It was a pity that Fleur would most likely not agree, otherwise Harley really wanted to try it on Fleur's head too. But there was still plenty of time, she would have the chance eventually. The three beautiful girls walked together through the village, attracting many gazes. After all, two of them had Vila blood, and the last one was even a witch. Although Harley and Fleur could both control their charm very well, and Gabrielle was too young for her Vila blood's charm to fully manifest, their fundamental beauty was undeniable. So, along the way, they still caused others to frequently turn their heads. Potion Village, although a village for potions masters, also had bars and some shops. Anyone who could run a shop here usually had some connection to the Extraordinary Potioneers Association. After all, wizards who came here generally weren't short on money and were very generous, so those who did business here weren't ordinary people either. Harley and Fleur bought many souvenirs, and Harley even gave Gabrielle a bracelet made from dried soporific root. The leaves of this plant were one of the important ingredients for brewing the awakening potion, and even the roots, which weren't used in potion brewing, could have a certain refreshing effect. The three of them wandered through the village all afternoon and finally returned to the pub for a delicious meal. Fleur took Gabrielle, preparing to go home. Mr. Delacour had his own house in the village, so during this time, Fleur only occasionally came to the pub to eat and to find Harley. However, Gabrielle seemed reluctant to leave. The little girl tugged at Fleur's robe and said in a soft voice, Sister, can I stay overnight with Big Sister Harley? I've never stayed in a pub before." "No, you can't bother others." Fleur's face hardened, looking serious. "Papa told me to keep a close eye on you. And we've never stayed in a pub before for safety reasons." Then she smiled apologetically at Harley. "Harley, you know, the wizarding world isn't safe either. Half Vila or even rarer than Vila, so we have to consider safety." The little girl's eyes darted around, and she suddenly hugged Fleur's slender waist. "Sister, please. This pub is absolutely safe, and I can sleep with Big Sister Harley, and there are Hogwarts professors in the next room. That way it'll be safe. If you're really worried, you can stay too. I secretly saw when I came here for breakfast this morning that the bedsheets the house elf changed were very big. The three of us sleeping in one bed definitely won't be crowded." Harley looked at Gabrielle in shock. Good girl, truly talented. If conditions allowed, Harley would have even wanted to treat her to a bottle of Assassin's Potion. After all, with such talent, it wouldn't do not to cultivate it properly. However, Harley only thought about it. After all, she knew best how difficult the assassin pathway was. And Gabrielle was only curious because she had never stayed in a pub before. At Gabrielle's pleading, Fleur wavered a little, but she didn't agree immediately. After all, Gabrielle's tricks were all ones she herself had used up in her youth, and she had even been more mischievous than Gabrielle back then. What swayed her were Gabrielle's reasons. It was indeed a very good opportunity. Seeing that Fleur was wavering, Gabrielle blinked her big eyes and then turned to hug Harley's arm. "Big sister Harley, can you please say something for me and get sister to agree to let me stay?" A helpless smile appeared on Harley's face. She rubbed the little girl's cheek in her arms and looked at Fleur. "Why don't you two stay tonight? The room is big enough anyway, and I don't mind." Fleur sighed. "I'll consider it, but Gabrielle, you have to come home with me and discuss it with Papa. Then let's hurry back." Gabrielle instantly let go of Harley and skipped back to her sister's side, her face showing an eager expression. Dumbledore did not hesitate to agree to Harley's request. In his opinion, making more friends was even more important than studying magic. Because Harley's friends were coming to stay, Professor Snape simply left the parchment with the rules for Harley, letting her familiarize herself with them first. In the evening, the Delacour sisters arrived on time. Mr. Delacour saw them all the way to the pub door before leaving. "Big sister Harley, we're here." Gabrielle seemed to be staying in a pub for the first time, so she was very excited, running around the room non-stop. Fortunately, the room was well soundproofed, so there were no complaints. Chapter 145 The second round of competition with increased difficulty. "Sorry for the trouble," Fleur said apologetically, sitting on a chair with her hands clasped on her lap. "It's fine, it's boring to always be cooped up in my room researching potions," Harley said leisurely, sitting on the edge of the bed, leaning back with her hands supporting her. "Did you bring blankets? Or should I ask the bar reception for another one?" "We brought our own." Fleur patted her pocket, which clearly wasn't as small as it looked. Harley's eyebrows raised slightly, a hint of regret in her heart. After all, the thin blanket provided by the bar was quite large, enough to cover the entire bed, and could easily be shared by 3 people. However, Harley didn't show it, she just pulled out the parchment Professor Snape had given her from her pocket. "Fleur, have you seen the content of the second round of the competition?" "Dad only told me the general content, as the details change every year and we have to wait for the organizers to announce them. I was planning to study the specifics tonight, but Gabrielle insisted on coming over, so I'll wait until tomorrow." Fleur shook her head, her gaze shifting to the parchment. "Is what you have the latest competition content?" "Of course." Harley unrolled the parchment and motioned for Fleur to sit closer. "Contestants depart at 8 a.m. to enter the magical garden and collect potion ingredients. After collecting enough ingredients, contestants return to the starting point and brew a potion using the ingredients they found." Fleur read it out softly as she looked. "There are no time limits for collecting ingredients or for brewing the potion, only that the total time must not exceed 10 hours. The organizers will consider various factors to determine the champion. This competition is very difficult. It's a huge test of the contestants' overall strength." Fleur frowned, her expression not looking good, and Harley's face also showed a thoughtful look. Both of them were exceptionally intelligent and naturally saw how high the difficulty of the second round was. In previous competitions, contestants usually departed at 8 a.m., given 6 hours to collect materials. After returning, contestants would place their materials at their designated spot and then have an hour and a half of rest. From 3:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m., contestants would have 2 hours to brew their potion. Finally, judges would score based on multiple factors such as potion difficulty, potion quality, and time spent collecting materials. The competition results would be announced at 6 p.m., determining the ultimate champion. This time, although the total duration was 10 hours and there were no specific time limits for completing each task, it was actually a greater challenge. Because this time, the crucial hour and a half of rest time was missing. Overall, just the first task, collecting materials, was not an easy job to complete. The Magical Garden is the largest existing potion material supply area in the entire wizarding world, containing almost all known and non-extinct potions from the entire wizarding world. Even the Yanling grass living in the crater of Mount Fuji in Japan or the ice epiphyllum in the hollows beneath the Antarctic ice sheet can be found in the Magical Garden. To achieve this arduous task, different areas were opened in the Magical Garden, creating diverse environments. Thunderstorms, volcanoes, polar regions, swamps, tropical rainforests, all kinds of harsh environments exist within this Magical Garden. Before coming to the competition, Harley was very shocked when Professor Slughorn introduced the Magical Garden, as it didn't seem like something current wizards could achieve. Not to mention, obtaining complete, fresh seeds of the ice epiphyllum from the hollows beneath the Antarctic ice sheet would be difficult even for an average demigod. Let alone creating and maintaining the corresponding environment in the Magical Garden for them to grow. However, Nicholas Flamel answered Harley's question, explaining that the magical garden itself was also a legacy of ancient wizards. Thousands of years ago, the magical garden already existed and supplied materials to wizards in large quantities. However, later, for unknown reasons, the magical garden was sealed by wizards. It wasn't until shortly after the Extraordinary Potioneers Association was established that the magic sealing the magical garden disappeared, revealing this treasure to everyone. Although by now, the scale of the magical garden has shrunk to less than 1%, and most of the particularly rare, precious magical plants with harsh growing conditions have largely died off. But for current wizards, this is still a rich asset. And the potions masters and herbology masters in the Extraordinary Potioneers Association continuously transplanted potions into the garden, replenished depleted magic, and hired Nicholas Flamel to reseal it. Searching for needed materials in such a vast garden is clearly a comprehensive test of a contestant's knowledge, physical endurance, logic, and other abilities. After all, the park only provides a general environmental map, not the specific distribution locations of potion ingredients, nor does it provide means of transportation. Contestants need to determine the location of their required materials, plan a reasonable route, and rely on themselves to collect the materials. And after finding enough materials, the organizers did not leave any rest time for the contestants. Without this crucial hour and a half, contestants must complete the potion brewing under conditions of physical exhaustion and poor state. After all, if you choose to rest during the competition time, while other contestants choose to brew potions, they will likely finish earlier and get higher scores. And when it comes to the specific choice of potion, there are even more points to consider. That's why Fleur said that the overall difficulty of the second round soared, making it the greatest test of students' comprehensive qualities. Of course, Harley also spotted a few very stable and safe approaches, but choosing such a strategy would likely not result in a particularly high score. Don't think about it, the organizers wouldn't leave an impossible task. I can already think of at least 2 plans. Talk to Mr. Delacour tomorrow, he'll definitely have more suggestions. Harley trusted Mr. Delacour's insight, so she didn't rashly voice her own thoughts. Fleur wanted to talk more with Harley, but both suddenly felt a weight on their backs, as a soft body pressed against them. Gabrielle had somehow already gotten onto the bed, half kneeling behind them, her hands on Harley and Fleur's shoulders, trying to peek at the parchment's content through the gap between their heads. Gabrielle. Fleur was clearly a little angry, snarling in a low voice, "Watch your manners. Is this how Mom and Dad usually teach you?" Gabrielle whimpered in fright, shrinking her head back, and sat kneeling properly on the bed, like a startled little bird, pitiful and helpless. Harley smiled and pinched Gabrielle's cheek. The big sisters are talking about serious business, discussing the second round of the competition. If you're curious, you can ask your dad. He knows the specifics, it's just whether he's willing to tell you. Then no. Gabrielle's voice was barely louder than a mosquito, clearly a little afraid of Mr. Delacour. Sorry, Dad is usually very strict with her, so she starts being mischievous as soon as she's unrestrained. It's fine, Harley shook her head, there's a bathroom over there, do you need to shower? I see it's getting late, and we have to get up early tomorrow to prepare for the competition. Chapter 146, Deep into the Magic Garden. Harley had originally been looking forward to the Delacour sisters staying over, but she quickly regretted making that decision. Gabrielle, the little girl who had just turned 8, was truly full of energy and very boisterous. She was always asking questions, and even when water got into her mouth during a bath, it didn't stop her from continuing to talk afterwards. Harley only managed to fall asleep close to midnight. The next day, Harley was still constantly yawning during breakfast, looking very tired. Fleur also expressed her apologies and quickly dragged Gabrielle away. Despite the little girl's efforts to persuade them to let her stay another night, she was ruthlessly suppressed. Over the next week, Harley and the professors developed a plan to deal with the second round of the competition. When entering the magical garden to collect materials, the most important thing was to ensure that enough materials were collected to brew a potion. And there were no magical creatures in the magical garden, at most only some common insects or small animals, which greatly reduced the range of potions. Based on these 2 points, Harley quickly selected several potions. The backup potions were Shrinking Potion and Awakening Potion, and the main ingredients required for these 2 potions, Shrivel Figs and Awakening Herbs, were not particularly rare. Professor Slughorn also told Harley that these 2 plants could be found on the outskirts of a certain area in the magical garden. Their auxiliary ingredients were even more common, some were not even magical plants, but common wildflowers found by the roadside, such as the daisies needed for Shrinking Potion. However, Shrinking Potion was slightly more troublesome, also requiring rat spleens and leech's juice. These two common creatures certainly existed in the magical garden, but catching them was more troublesome, and extracting spleens or juicing them was an even more delicate task. Moreover, if Harley chose these two potions, her score would not be particularly high. After all, the difficulty of these two potions was not great, and Hogwarts would choose to teach students to brew them in their 4th or 5th year. Harley's primary target potion was Invisibility Potion, an advanced potion that many potion makers could not brew. The main ingredients for this potion were phantasm flowers and fresh leaves from shadow trees, both of which were precious endangered plants. Although these two plants also existed in the magical garden, they were in very deep areas. Finding them would require a very long time and a lot of effort. But Harley had developed a new method, using the more common mirage grass as a substitute. Harley was very confident that when she brewed a brand new version of the invisibility potion, she would definitely get a very high score. Now the biggest problem was how to process the mirage grass in a short time. After all, Harley's original processing method took a lot of time. Although she had a rudimentary plan for processing mirage grass in a short time a while ago, it had not yet formed a systematic method. Harley spent a full 3 days, finally determining a plan that would be 100% successful. Besides immersing herself in Professor Slughorn's home, focused on researching potions, Harley did nothing else. This disappointed people from other magical schools or some potion makers, as they wanted to visit Harley for various reasons. 10 days was not a short time, but it was not long either. On the morning of the 11th day, after the first round of the competition ended, all the contestants gathered again in the square, sitting in their previously assigned positions. The contestants uniformly wore the brand new uniforms issued by the Extraordinary Potioneers Association, to prevent anyone from secretly bringing in some hard-to-find materials. Someone had done this before, but he was very unlucky to encounter a natural legilimens. After that, the competition added this rule: clothes must be uniformly worn from the Extraordinary Potioneers Association. At the same time, because many magical plants were incredibly fragile, it was not possible to widely use monitoring magic to observe the contestants' process of finding materials. So the judges could only choose to apply positioning magic to the uniforms, to ensure that if a student was in danger, timely rescue could be provided. However, accessories did not seem to be within their detection range, so when Harley appeared wearing white silk gloves, no one paid attention to this point. The second round of the competition is about to begin, President Hector said from the judges' stand. I will repeat the rules one last time. You will have 10 hours to enter the magical garden to search for materials and use them to brew a potion. The International Confederation of Wizards has arranged patrols in the magical garden to ensure your safety. If you encounter irresistible danger, you can fire a red spark into the sky. However, this also means that the contestants' journey of finding materials officially ends, and they can only brew with the potion materials already collected. Furthermore, I will give one last warning to everyone: attacking each other is forbidden. Although we cannot monitor with magic, if a contestant claims to have been attacked, we will use the Priori Incantatem to check your wand. Now I declare, the competition begins. President Hector's wand tip shot a golden firework into the sky, and the contestants quickly left their seats, heading towards the entrance of the magical garden at the end of the square. Harley and Fleur entered the entrance together, and then the two parted ways. On the one hand, their schools were different, and on the other hand, both Harley and Fleur were proud witches. Harley had always been very confident in her abilities and did not believe that she needed a companion for such a simple task. And Fleur also refused to team up with Harley. She looked down on all the students of Beauxbatons, which is why her connection with Harley was so close, even hoping that her only rival and friend she could respect would come to Beauxbatons for school. So Fleur's pride led her to enter the magical garden alone. After entering the forest, Harley leapt lightly onto a tree, and her uniform was transfigured into light sportswear. Harley moved like a phantom, swiftly traversing between the branches, searching for the materials she needed. The outskirts of the magical garden were full of tall trees, and Harley felt as if she had returned to the forbidden forest. Obviously, most of the materials here were common ones, completely unsuitable for Harley's needs. Harley's destinations were the swamp area and the ice and snow area in the magical garden. The swamp area was far from the entrance gate of the magical garden, and the ice and snow area was to the east of the swamp area. The mirage grass Harley needed preferred to grow in swampy areas, and the various plants needed to process mirage grass grew separately in the ice and snow and swamp areas. If Harley hadn't been confident enough in her speed, she would never have chosen this potion. The swamp area had a very harsh environment. There were not many trees here, and the roads were very bad. Although the Extraordinary Potioneers Association had explored dozens of safe routes and marked them. However, based on common sense, it could be inferred that any mature, high-quality mirage grass in these places would have already been picked. So it was highly likely that she would have to go deeper into the swamp. Just as she had guessed, after Harley arrived at the edge of the swamp, she silently looked at the safe routes marked by the Extraordinary Potioneers Association. There were indeed some mirage grass on both sides of the road, but their quality was not high, either having congenital defects or not yet mature. Chapter 147 Monsters from Hogwarts. Harley sighed. She hated this kind of time-consuming and labor-intensive basic work. Without wasting time, Harley clapped her hands softly. Countless spider silks appeared out of thin air, spreading in all directions. These silks were transparent and soft, acting as an extension of Harley's arms. Harley slowly walked forward, not choosing the safe route marked by the Extraordinary Potioneers Association, but stepping into the dark, unknown territory. She walked unhurriedly and gracefully, and with every step she took forward, a faint blue light bloomed beneath her white sneakers. Behind Harley, a long road paved with ice had already appeared. A wand appeared in Harley's hand at some point. Since her self-made magic mirror and wand couldn't be brought in, she could only use the available tools. Harley's divination skills weren't particularly strong, but they had a high success rate for finding the general location of mirage grass. And simply treated wood could be used. The swamp was vast, and the wood in Harley's hand kept detaching, pointing in different directions. Although the probability of failure was not small, it also helped Harley speed up her search. In the middle, she also encountered a male student from Castelo Bruxo, a magic school in Brazil. That boy was probably preparing to make a potion unique to Brazil, and since the tropical rainforest had a considerable swamp area, he entered the swamp to look for materials. When they met, the boy was about to pick a blood-dissolving herb, and his tools were all ready. However, that herb was also one of the essential ingredients Harley needed to process mirage grass, so Harley unceremoniously prepared to snatch it. Of course, there was no conflict between them. The boy looked at the icy road behind Harley, then watched as Harley tapped the ground with her toe, and the surrounding swamp instantly froze with thick ice, so he decisively chose to give up that blood-dissolving herb. No one who could reach this place was a fool. Although the rules prohibited contestants from attacking each other, if he were truly attacked, he would definitely be eliminated. Even if the attacker was punished, he would still suffer the loss, wouldn't he? Moreover, judging by Harley's appearance, she was clearly a master of wandless magic. Even if he reported her malicious attack afterward, the organizers wouldn't be able to detect it. The flashback charm only works on wands, not on a wizard's fingers. Given that, it was better to give up this blood-dissolving herb and show off his gentlemanly demeanor. After all, Harley's beauty deeply moved the boy. He felt like he was in love. However, Harley ignored him, decisively leaving after picking the blood-dissolving herb, not even listening to what the boy said. This greatly disappointed the boy, and he even wanted to chase after her. But just as he was about to take a step, he suddenly found that his feet had been frozen in place at some point. After a full half an hour, Harley had gathered all the materials she could find in the swamp area, and had prepared double portions of each material. If other contestants were to complete this task, they would probably waste 2 to 3 hours here, and would not have enough time to rush to the snow-covered area. It was based on this point that Harley chose the more difficult invisibility potion, intending to win the championship in one fell swoop. Before leaving the swamp, Harley lightly touched the ice with her toe, and countless solid ice instantly melted. She glanced into the distance, then disappeared into the forest. 2 minutes later, a patrol team, a total of 8 adult wizards, emerged from their hiding place. They stared dumbfounded at the swamp, then looked in the direction Harley had disappeared earlier. If I'm not mistaken, that little girl earlier, she should be a Hogwarts student, right? I looked at the material before the competition. She seems to be only 13. Please tell me I'm mistaken, okay? A burly German man stammered, his face filled with shock. No, Brian, a thin American youth wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. Your memory is very good, no mistake. And looking at her face, she does look like a 13-year-old girl. However, to be able to freeze half the swamp at only 13, seemingly without using a wand, and even discovering our location, is truly terrifying. She's probably the personal disciple of Albus Dumbledore. Maybe the information is wrong. A French witch frowned. Even if Dumbledore is powerful, he couldn't possibly cultivate such a young and powerful wizard. I'd believe it if she could take down our entire team by herself, just standing there. You'd rather believe the information is wrong. The American youth rolled his eyes. That's material personally reviewed by the president, how could it be wrong? The usually taciturn patrol captain spoke at this moment. stop arguing, let's continue our patrol mission. However, this time, Hogwarts has indeed sent out a monster. Harley naturally didn't know about the patrol members' argument. Although she had discovered their presence, seeing the uniform Extraordinary Potioneers Association badges on them, Harley naturally understood their identities. Otherwise, peeking at a witch in such a completely unfamiliar environment, Harley would at least have to give them a curse or two. Harley glided through the forest, light as a swallow, flying towards the snow-covered region. Here, snow and wind filled the air, and the biting cold was very unkind to the witch dressed in light summer clothes. And while a witch could control ice, she herself had no resistance to the cold. Many agony witches, when casting Frozen World, if they weren't skilled enough with their abilities and couldn't deliberately avoid themselves, might even freeze themselves into ice sculptures. Witches even needed to release black flame to burn off the ice on their bodies, or control the external ice to dissipate after stopping Frozen World, so as not to freeze themselves to death. Harley stood under a tree, watching the heavy snow fall, sighed, and decided to rest for a while. Spider silk spread behind Harley and hung on the tree, forming a swing. Harley sat on it gracefully, pulling out a few brightly colored fruits from her hand. The organizers clearly stated in the rules that they would not provide food and water, but they did not say that contestants could not pick edible plants in the park. And for a qualified potion maker, identifying edible plants in the wild is basic knowledge. So, when she passed through the tropical rainforest area earlier, Harley picked a few potion ingredients for frostbite healing agents. These fruits were non-toxic, and eating them also had a warming effect on the stomach, which was very beneficial for Harley's subsequent actions. After a short rest, Harley jumped off the swing, and the spider silk swayed gracefully in the wind. She casually took out some common flowers and grasses from the pocket provided during the competition for holding materials. Extracting essential oils and hydrosols is a delicate task, and Harley couldn't do it in the current environment. So Harley could only use the raw materials directly. Although the effect of the ritual wouldn't be great this way, it was better than nothing. Light bloomed in Harley's hands, then covered her entire body. Black flame also bloomed in Harley's black hair and flowed continuously over her body, dispelling the cold that the ritual hadn't blocked. Fully armored in this way, Harley finally entered the snow-covered area. Chapter 148 Enjoy the Witch's Mercy. The icy region was vast, and the shimmering, crystal-clear snowflakes in the cold wind transformed into sharp daggers, piercing the skin of every living creature. Harley felt a bit helpless. It seemed her luck wasn't great, she was quite far from the low-temperature zone. Now she had no choice but to traverse the entire polar region. Half an hour to cross the polar region, 1 hour to gather all materials. Harley proceeded according to her pre-planned schedule, relying on the Yuan to determine the correct route. An hour and a half later, Harley reappeared at the edge of the polar region. As the organizer targeting Koldovstort's contestants, Harley recalled what she had seen in the map she had previously looked at, overturning her earlier guess about her bad luck. The entrance we used to enter the magical garden was precisely the closest to the polar region and the furthest from the regular cold zones. And the polar region is so long and narrow, there's no way to go around it. This is definitely targeted. After all, 2 Koldovstort's contestants had already fallen in the polar region, so Harley naturally became suspicious. However, considering the geographical locations of the other 7 wizarding schools participating in the countries of origin of the main members of the Extraordinary Potioneers Association, targeting Koldovstort's contestants was not so hard to understand. Harley was kind enough to launch red flares for both contestants, ensuring they would be rescued by the patrol team. Harley extinguished the flames around her as she pondered. By now, Harley had only spent a little over 3 hours, which was plenty of time to leisurely return to the square and recover her stamina. However, as she reached the edge of the forest, her ears suddenly twitched, and she instinctively lunged to the side. A red light shot out from behind a tree on Harley's flank, hitting the open ground. Harley's expression was not pleasant. She had been a bit too careless. After passing through the polar region, she had let her guard down and hadn't noticed someone else in the distance. Seeing that his sneak attack had failed, the unknown assailant immediately cast several more charms. Harley snorted coldly and snapped her fingers. 6 black flames instantly condensed in midair and flew towards the large tree. 2 of the flames exploded in midair, blocking the spells flying towards Harley. The remaining flames heavily impacted the large tree, causing it to collapse directly. A young man wearing a Uagadu Wizarding School uniform scrambled out from behind the tree, shouting loudly in English. "Don't hit me. Attacking others will get you disqualified." Harley gave him a cold glance, and a large amount of spider silk extended from her back, instantly forming white walls around them. "You can scream all you want. If a single sound gets out, I lose, Harley said, her clear voice carrying endless coldness and killing intent. What would be the consequences of ambushing a witch in such a desolate wilderness? Harley wasn't sure about other witches' situations. But if she were the one ambushed, she might just gain a fresh puppet for scouting. Of course, if the assailant's appearance was truly too ugly, turning him directly into materials wasn't out of the question either. However, considering that it was a competition and she couldn't kill the assailant in one blow, Harley could only choose to go a little easier on him. What are you going to do? I warn you, there's a patrol team nearby. The young man instantly panicked. But he feigned composure and threatened, if they catch you attacking other contestants, you'll be disqualified immediately. Hey, Harley chuckled, but it sent a chill down the young man's spine. You attacked me first, and the fact that you dared to attack me actively just proves that there's no patrol team around, doesn't it? The young man's face darkened, and he suddenly knelt down, begging for mercy. Good sister, please spare me, I was wrong. I shouldn't have attacked you, please let me go. Our school is counting on me to get a good result. At the same time, the young man felt bitter. Although he realized Harley was quite strong, able to emerge from the polar region unharmed. But deep down, he believed that Harley shouldn't have much stamina left. That biting cold wind, even strong Russian wizards like bears couldn't endure it, let alone such a delicate young girl. So, if he took the opportunity to ambush her, he could not only eliminate a competitor but also acquire a large batch of materials. Perhaps he might even stumble upon materials he hadn't collected yet, like a blind cat finding a dead mouse. Who knew Harley's strength was so formidable? She easily dodged his ambush and, in turn, trapped him here. The black fireballs that had previously blown down the trees, and the thick white walls surrounding them, all demonstrated Harley's power. However, the young man wasn't prepared to withdraw from the competition just like that. Although he desperately begged for mercy, it was only to exploit the young girl's sympathy. After all, Harley didn't look very old, and girls her age were always full of sympathy and care for the weak. In reality, he was already ready to cast a stupefy from his fingers the moment he looked up. Wandless spellcasting couldn't be detected, so even if Harley saw the attacker and reported him afterward, what good would it do? The Extraordinary Potioneers Association had no way to sanction him. But his little scheme didn't escape Harley's notice at all. The moment the young man began to beg for mercy, a mocking smile played on Harley's lips. Of course, I can spare you. Harley's voice was as calm as before, but in the young man's ears, it was like heavenly music. Just as the young man was ready to launch another sneak attack, Harley continued, however, since you attacked me, I naturally can't just forgive you. How about this, can you give me a performance? What kind of performance? The young man wasn't really listening to Harley's words, he was just using the opportunity to look up, and his hand also tried to rise. But he suddenly felt his arms were so heavy. They seemed to be firmly locked to the ground by something. The things wrapped around his hands seemed to be the same color as the surrounding walls. It was spider silk. At this moment, Harley leaned slightly forward, her voice playful, yet like a demon's. Can you show me the consequences of ambushing a witch? The spider silk instantly pierced into the young man's blood vessels and gradually spread. His blood vessels swelled, veins bulged on the young man's skin, and he visibly thickened by a whole size. Ah! A shrill scream rang out, but Harley remained unmoved, merely frowning slightly. So noisy. A sneaker kicked heavily into the young man's face, knocking out several of his pristine white teeth, and blood instantly gushed out. The young man wanted to struggle, wanted to roll on the ground, but he was firmly bound in place, unable to move. His shouts were also forcibly sealed in his throat by a curse, which made the young man feel even more pain. Harley, however, did not admire the misery of the person at her feet. She merely waved her hand, and a gray light entered the young man's heart. I'll give you a small curse, a tiny seed of illness, Harley said to herself, ignoring the terror on the young man's face. If I kill you now, I'll definitely be investigated. Although they won't have evidence, it's still very troublesome. So, let you painfully sicken and die on your way back to school. As long as the disease seed isn't removed, your illness won't heal. Even if there's a potions master accompanying you, what then? You'll still just watch yourself die. Enjoy the witch's final mercy. Chapter 149, Freshly Baked Illusion Potion. After admiring the young man's miserable state for a few more minutes, Harley stopped wasting time. All the spider silk simultaneously snapped, turning into magic, and delivering one last blow to him. Looking at the young man's pathetic state, Harley shook her head. This won't do. You look too conspicuous. It seems I'll have to give you some simple treatment. Ah, I'm truly too benevolent. 2 silver fruits flew out of Harley's pocket. Harley gently waved her hand, and the fruits were instantly enveloped by spider silk. The spider silk tightened inwards, squeezing the fruits into juice. Twist amplify. Harley coldly raised her left hand, clenching it in the air. The young man's body came into contact with the juice, and the bulging veins slowly began to return to normal. The juice of this fruit has a decent healing effect and is often used by knowledgeable people in the wild to treat wounds. And Harley, through the distortion of the fallen glove, amplified its healing function. As for any side effects of such an operation, that was not within Harley's consideration. At the same time, several gray rays of light flew from Harley's fingertips and merged into the young man's forehead. I'm sorry, but I can only let you die in confusion. To avoid trouble for myself, I've sealed your memories. The young man wanted to struggle, wanted to beg for mercy, but couldn't utter a single word. His face, a mix of hatred and despair, slowly closed his eyes and fell into a coma. The spider silk wall dissipated, and Harley left without looking back, not forgetting to take his pocket before she left. Those who provoke a witch must be prepared for the consequences. Now he could live a few more days instead of directly turning into bones. He should already be grateful to Harley. The rest of the journey was smooth sailing, and Harley did not encounter any more accidents. After all, not everyone can cast spells wandlessly, only contestants from Ouagadougou are skilled in this. Ambushes in previous competitions were mostly created by Ouagadougou contestants, and occasionally, Koldovstort's contestants would rely on their physique for physical ambushes. Since these two methods cannot be detected afterwards, as long as they are not caught in the act, the organizers have no recourse. However, this time, 2 of the 3 contestants from these 2 magic schools have already been confirmed eliminated. As for the remaining one, it would be better if he were eliminated cleanly. Harley left the magical garden and returned to the square. By this time, 4 hours had passed, and only the principals and professors of the magic schools remained in the audience seats, while the judges' seats were completely full. Apparently, the house elves had delivered food directly to the judges' seats, preventing the judges from missing any important parts. In the square, a Durmstrang contestant was resting. Harley glanced at the ingredients in front of him from a distance and knew the potion he was preparing to brew. He had chosen the shrinking potion, Harley's #1 alternative plan. After all, the brewing process for this potion is not difficult, and obtaining the ingredients is very simple. They can be found in the forest at the entrance of the magical garden. Those who delve deep into the magical garden and enter specific areas, like Harley, were ultimately a minority. The boy was resting at this time, and when he saw someone else emerge from the entrance of the magical garden, he was visibly startled. When he looked closely and realized it was the first-place winner of the first round, he immediately straightened up, abandoning his rest, and began to process the ingredients. After all, the sooner the potion is completed, the higher the score obtained. Harley did not let others' actions disrupt her rhythm. She returned to her seat and emptied all the ingredients from her bag. The potion in the previous young man's bag had been emptied by Harley, and the bag was casually thrown by the roadside. The ingredients inside were nothing to Harley, but she still added them to her collection. Anyway, unused ingredients cannot be taken away by contestants and must eventually be returned to the organizers, which is equivalent to voluntary labor. Therefore, no points would be deducted if a contestant did not use all the ingredients they obtained. Moreover, obtaining more ingredients in a short time is a hidden bonus point, because it proves the contestant's strong practical ability. Looking at the large pile of ingredients next to Harley's seat, the faces of the principals and potions professors from other schools were not looking good. Those principals might not be masters in this field, but at least they understood some potion knowledge. As for the potions professors, this was their livelihood. Perhaps their magic school's location didn't have a certain ingredient, but that didn't prevent them from understanding it. After a quick glance, many noticed that these ingredients came from areas deep within the magical garden. And they were unable to piece together a single potion with these ingredients. This indicated that Harley was preparing to brew a potion of higher difficulty, and it was either an original creation or a recently improved potion. If she succeeded, the championship would likely be out of reach for other contestants. After all, everyone knew the skill level of their own students. Under such stringent competition conditions, being able to brew a potion of the shrinking potion's difficulty was already very good. Only Professor Slughorn's eyes gleamed with excitement, feeling that the championship was getting closer and closer to Hogwarts. Harley's attention was completely focused, completely shutting out external distractions, and she began to process the mirage grass. At the judges' table, President Hector let out a soft gasp. The ingredients are wrong. Could it be that this child has improved the invisibility potion again? What's going on? Tell us quickly. The people next to him immediately leaned over curiously to ask. Several of them had corresponded with Harley, and the rest had heard of this Hogwarts genius. They were still very interested in the deeds of this genius. Keep watching. I'll tell you in detail after the competition. President Hector shook his head, intently watching Harley's movements. Harley soaked the mirage grass, then began to process auxiliary ingredients like the ice lotus. She was unhurried, taking over an hour in total, successfully brewing a pot of what could be called a perfect invisibility potion. During this time, several more contestants returned. Upon seeing that 2 contestants were already in action in the square, they didn't bother to rest and immediately began to process their ingredients. However, there were also some more rational contestants, such as Fleur, who was not anxious at all. Fleur even closed her eyes and rested for half an hour, and only after ensuring she had recovered to her optimal state did she begin making her potion. The potion was finally finished. Harley clapped her hands and extinguished the flames under the cauldron. After using Coleritus frigidus to cool the potion, Harley checked its quality and then nodded with satisfaction. She didn't hesitate, scooped out a small cup of the potion, and drank it in front of everyone. Suppressed gasps instantly erupted from the judges and audience seats, as Harley's figure gradually disappeared from everyone's sight. Invisibility potion. The judges and many of the audience who had finished their meals and returned had eyes full of surprise, as they had clearly seen the ingredients Harley used earlier. And these potions masters were very certain that mirage grass was not an ingredient for the invisibility potion in their memory. This indicated that Harley had improved the formula. In the Hogwarts section, Professor Slughorn even stood up directly in joy. He made a great effort to restrain himself from shouting out what was in his heart: "We are the champions." But the faces of the people from other magic schools were not so pleasant. They had already realized that they had no chance at the championship. Chapter 150, the same era as the genius. Harley's figure quickly reappeared. She poured some potion into a small vial, then sat down, quietly waiting for the others to finish the competition. The second round of the competition was not yet over, and the champion would be decided after this round, so contestants who had finished brewing their potions could not leave. The judges' eyes were filled with anticipation, clearly eager to go and study Harley's potion. However, considering that this might cause mental pressure on other contestants and thus affect the results, they remained seated at the judges' table. Only one judge went down, brought up the vial of potion, and passed it around so everyone could admire it. At this moment, the slowest contestant just walked out of the magical garden. This contestant from Castelo Bruxo in Brazil was originally full of confidence, as he had found many hard-to-find ingredients and was preparing to brew some potions unique to Brazil. Then he saw Harley sitting with her eyes closed, resting, with the brewed potion placed in front of her. The contestant was immediately stunned and instinctively slapped himself. He had only just gathered all the ingredients, so why had someone already brewed the potion? Is this fair? Is this reasonable? Is there any humanity left in this world? Is this what a genius is? With a surge of indignation, he quickly returned to his position. After all, if he didn't start soon, he might run out of time. However, his expression occasionally showed a dazed look, clearly indicating he had suffered a blow. As for whether this pot of potion could still be successfully brewed, that remained a question. As time passed, potions were freshly brewed one after another, and various colored vapors converged into a cloud in the square. The sun was setting, and Principal Hector blew a magical whistle. Time's up. Contestants, please extinguish the flames under your cauldrons and cease all actions. If there are any abnormal movements, we will deduct points as appropriate, and severe cases will be deemed cheating. No contestant dared to ignore Principal Hector's warning and all stopped their actions. The judges quickly left their seats, but unlike the first round, they did not scatter to score. Instead, they collectively gathered in front of Harley's cauldron. "It's marvelous," an old woman exclaimed, pointing her wand at the remaining liquid in the basin where the mirage grass had been soaked, continuously marveling. To think of using this method to circumvent the flaws of mirage grass having too little magic and unstable properties. I remember that Grillo was stuck on this very point back then. Yes, Alifia, the old man next to her chimed in. Potions Master Grillo would probably be very happy if he knew that the method he proved wrong could actually be realized. Harley had already quietly retreated to the side, giving the space to the judges. At this moment, she was calculating in her mind that she would write a paper on her improved invisibility potion and submit it to Potions Master when she returned. Then she would license the patent for the potion to the Extraordinary Potioneers Association, and the Extraordinary Potioneers Association would naturally collect the patent fees for her. They would not go so far as to offend a potential rising star of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry for the patent of a potion. Professor Slughorn had already planned this scheme for Harley. Although she didn't know why the Extraordinary Potioneers Association could still collect patent fees after the formula was made public. But since Professor Slughorn was very confident, Harley didn't ask any more questions. After all, everyone has their own specialization, and this was not Harley's strength. The masters finally restrained their inner excitement and began to review the results of other contestants. Before leaving, Principal Hector also patted Harley's shoulder. "Child, after the competition, I think we can talk more about the invisibility potion." At this moment, the other contestants were already bewildered. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? Why aren't the judges looking at me, but instead gathered around Miss Harley Potter? What magic does her potion possess? Does this mean I'm destined to lose? It wasn't until the judges came closer that they snapped out of it, no longer thinking about what Harley had done, but respectfully wanting to introduce their potions to the judges. However, the judges were well informed and didn't need the contestants to introduce anything. They could even say they understood the potions in front of them better than the contestants. Moreover, the potions chosen by this group of contestants had no novelty at all. They were basically potions that their predecessors had made countless times. Only Fleur's brewed potion barely caught the eye of the potions masters. She brewed a weakened version of the instant vigor tonic. This was a special skill Mr. Delacour taught Fleur, said to be a potion that Fleur's grandfather, who married Avila, spent a lot of time modifying. There's a bug here. The words for grandmother and maternal grandmother are the same in English, and the version the author read translated the hair in Fleur's wand as being from her grandmother. So the author previously said that Vila was Fleur's grandmother. But in fact, according to the description in the 7th book, Fleur's Vila heritage should come from her mother. This should be a translation issue, but the author won't dwell on it. Ordinary vigor tonics are very effective, but their potency is too strong, making it easy to oversupplement. This improved vigor tonic has slightly weakened nourishing effects, is gentler, and takes effect faster, making it suitable for more situations. The potions masters also gave high praise for this. However, compared to the invisibility potion that Harley almost single-handedly improved, Fleur was still slightly inferior. As for the last contestant from Castellobruxo, he seemed to have suffered a considerable blow, so problems occurred during the brewing process, and the quality of his potion was extremely poor. Although this potion was also considered difficult, he was still unable to contend for the championship. In this round of the competition, the judges did not give specific scores for each contestant again, as the champion was obvious. Alright, without a doubt, our champion has been born. Principal Hector returned to the judges' table and announced loudly. Congratulations to Miss Harley Potter for winning the Magical School Potion Championship. A round of enthusiastic applause immediately erupted below the stage. Professor Slughorn threw his wizard hat into the air, as if he had achieved this victory himself. However, among the Hogwarts professors, only he was happy. Professor Dumbledore and Professor Snape had both left early 2 days prior, and the current Hogwarts professor leading the team was Professor Slughorn. Although the applause from many wizards was not entirely sincere, especially since most of the magical school contestants and professors were not very happy. But they were also unwilling to disrespect Hogwarts over such a small matter. After all, everyone basically had a champion, and one defeat does not represent eternal failure. Moreover, most people considered themselves not particularly unlucky, at least much better than the Ouagadougou contestant who was ambushed and the 2 unlucky ones from Koldovstorts. The Ouagadougou contestant originally wanted to cause trouble, but was directly suppressed by their principal with an iron fist. What a joke, doesn't he know his own character? His reputation was already questionable, and it was good enough that the organizers didn't favor others, so why would he try to cause trouble? Did they really think the potions masters are vegetarians? Below, everyone had their own thoughts. While on stage, Harley walked up to the newly conjured awards platform under everyone's gaze. Principal Hector personally handed the golden cauldron, symbolizing the championship, to Harley and offered his blessings. Harley raised the golden cauldron high, a brilliant smile radiating on her face. Many people looked at her young face and thought of the description in the data, Harley Potter, who would only turn 13 at the end of July this year. To live in the same era as such a genius, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, someone murmured, a bitter expression on their face. Perhaps the birth of a genius can solve countless problems and allow the field of potion to take an epic step forward. But for others of her generation, this was simply a devastating disaster. But this was an unavoidable matter. Who could blame them for being born at the wrong time, in the same era as a genius? For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.